recently took it up in the area of being sort of a very beautiful person with patience and tolerance. I'm a damn fucking nerd. The problem with Wikipedia is they think that Joe Rogan is Kid Rock. But look at Joe Rogan and look at Kid Rock. Joe Rogan is clearly a kind of, this is not good, is it? This situation in the Middle East. And his impact speaks for itself. The net impact of Joe Rogan is fucking good. That's why someone's inviting people that wouldn't listen to. They're not listening to Rachel Maddow, people that listen to this. And they're hearing, yeah, you can't just nuclear bomb people. Yeah, that's why the landscape's changing, actually. That's why Republicans are the de facto default party of war, because libertarianism, individualism, and whatever new emergent ideologies are coming out of this new technological space are more sensitive to really important issues like war. And war is becoming, obviously, a defining issue because it's pervasive and unending.
I didn't say nuclear bomb you back.
No, I didn't say
okay, you said Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
No. Because you did say Hiroshima and Nagasaki were good things rather than what most people think, that they were quite bad things.
I was saying just the brute force of strength used. Yeah, but even a conventional.
What?
We can't bring you this content without the support of our partners, and this is a very appropriate partner. So you're an awakened wonder, and you know that there's every possibility your communications are being spied on. People are listening in on your private conversations. Say people, I mean government agencies and government-funded private agencies that are used as proxies to crush dissent. You've been watching this show for a while. You know that these Orwellian authorities that I'm interested in freedom are spying on us, and they'll do whatever it takes to control the narrative by controlling our connection. That's why we partner with Freedom Chat, a private messaging app that allows us to take who we want without fear of the tyrannical authorities listening into our conversations. This is the app that we trust to keep our data and our conversations private. Freedom Chat has true end-to-end encryption. No storage messages on their services, no commercial use of user data, meaning you won't sell your data and it will gain on monetary benefit. With Freedom Chat, you can disable screenshots, deactivate your phone's camera and microphone via the sensors off feature, and you can even prevent other individuals in a chat from saving your images or videos to their device without your explicit permission. Yes. You know it, and I know it. The establishment is watching this right now and our conversations. Stay free and protect your privacy with Freedom Chat. Go download the app right now by simply scanning the QR code, this QR code we're looking at, or visit freedomchat.com/brand. Download it. Brilliant. Let's get back to it.
Even a conventional bomb campaign. If you want to do that somewhere, they can do that to your place. This is what we have to
Fuck around and find out.
Yeah, because Kid Rock actually has continual recourse to kind of militarism that I'm sure many people will be dismissive of in the form of a cultural figure like Kid Rock, but actually policy in a lot of ways. Like Lindsey Graham, that's what he's saying. Joe Biden, that's what he's saying. We're being at best. No one is as enlightened as Joe Rogan looking all things distance. Like, where does this end? How does this benefit all of us? But Joe Rogan is a continually maligned, several occasions broadly attacked, figure of in some spaces, and their relevant spaces, figure of ridicule. And I'm sort of invite those people that sort of like having portrayed on SNL in the manner he was, or throughout CNN's coverage of the ivermectin stuff. What do you do with that? You don't want that introduced into the mainstream. That's something you want to cut off, like MAGA, basketball, deplorable, Joe Rogan, people challenging that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were pushing. Whoa, we're putting a lot of stuff out. In this, you get more diplomacy than in the Democratic Party's policy at the moment. You certainly get more discourse. You certainly get more open-mindedness. So how dare those institutions be critical, condemnatory, and dismissive of Joe Rogan and what Joe Rogan? Everyone and expect it all to kind of just work out being reasoned, actually quite soft, quite gentle, reflective, non-comfort. educational, diplomatic, it's sort of everything you want. It's not like licking a bloody ice cream or Disney Grand saying, bomb. These are mainstream political figures. I think perhaps something I've not really considered before is one of the symptoms of the emergent independent media space is that people are saying, all right, that person's good, that person's better. Like, you don't see that they're not an elite class. Like Boris Johnson wasn't made in the laboratory class, and that Joe Biden doesn't have a divine right to rule, and the Clintons aren't better and cleverer than everyone else. And all those Ivy Leagues. All of those institutions, CNN and MSNBC, they're not cleverer than ordinary people. They're not better. But once you start to challenge those hierarchies, you start to see it quake. On a fundamental issue like war, you realise, that's what's happening now. The system is falling apart, new things are emerging, and the people that need it to stay the same are trying to create endless crises to legitimise ever-increasing authoritarianism.
Until someone launches nukes. Yeah, but if you think about your kid who grew up and you don't know why there's a conflict between Palestine and Israel, and you're living in Palestine, and then they start bombing, and then they kill your mom. Yeah, but you didn't do, but you didn't do anything. And then you get guns. You're gonna go want to attack them. You're gonna want to avenge them. You're gonna want to join whatever group.
So why is World War II? You might not think that that's an earth-shattering observation from Joe Rogan, but you take a moment to reflect on the consequences of the Afghanistan and Iraq war and how closely they align with his prognosis for this conflict. You start to recognise that it might be valuable to have Anthony Blinken or Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi or Hillary Clinton or any one of these people say, look, the problem is with this ever-escalating tension in the Middle East is that it can't really ever end, can it? Even if you annihilate everybody there, wouldn't that ultimately lead to simply and more fracture, fissure and war within the region? And with this conflict between Ukraine and Russia, ultimately isn't that going to lead to an ever-escalating crisis with a nuclear-armed superstate? And what's the point in provoking China? You don't have to do this for very long. And bearing in mind this is conflict with Joe Rogan and Kid Rock, you always start with questions the entire geopolitical agenda. And people are doing that on an unprecedented scale. And that is why you've now got censorship industrial complex. That's why you've got two political parties that basically agree with one another on absolutely everything. And that's why you've got discontented populations that are actually crying out for change. Whether it's people on the cultural left or people on the cultural right, they're crying out for change. We don't want these institutions posing as democracy anymore. But when it comes to a clear-cut subject like war, it's all they're advocating for. There's no one in the political space saying anything as radical as Joe Rogan. In fact, I don't think there's anyone on MSNBC or CNN saying, isn't this going to escalate endlessly and potentially on that particular issue? I don't know how it all carves up anymore. That's why I have a position of why don't we not have any wars and always look for an immediate diplomatic solution where possible, and in particular align with the people that are in an inferior position and lend the might of the global community, in particular the United States nation, towards the trajectory of peace and diplomacy, as Joe Rogan is advocating for them, rather than arming them and having various positions dependent on the conflict. The attitude towards Ukraine is clearly different from the attitude on Israel, and that's a problem. It means there are no values or principles at the heart of it, just an agenda that relates to their long-term objectives, surely.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. This is fucking war. It's terrible. It's the worst thing I've heard of. I'm a peaceful man.
Well, I hope so, Kid Rock, but, the Budweiser thing, the Nagasaki thing, again, I might meet Kid Rock one day, and I look forward to it. That'll be too long down the tree.
Right, but you're not supposed to pick civilian targets. That's actually
You can't find war like that. Joe Rogan. That's actually a war crime. It seems like a more reasoned way to run the country. Isn't this the perfect compromise that everybody wants? Isn't this what the Republican demographic sort of wants? Isn't this what the demographic ultimately wants? Aren't these issues, on the whole, more more important than some of the cultural arguments that we're having. We have a media establishment that once you've locked in an unwinnable quarrel about gun ownership and abortion, when those subjects will be secondary to Armageddon, which is where both parties are steering us.
Yeah, well,
We're not supposed
they're
to
hiding
hit
in
civilian
civilian targets.
They are.
It will be easy to dismiss this encounter as a chat between a right-wing conspiracy theorist in the form of Kid Rock and Extension, except that points in this dialogue are an exchange of exactly what you hear from the most hawkish elements in Congress: Nikki Haley, Lindsey Graham, bomb them, almost literal quote. So in that moment, Kid Rock is a conduit of views that are available to you on mainstream media through members of Congress. And Joe Rogan is demonstrating more diplomacy, sensitivity, and understanding than the most sensitive members of the Democratic Party, and advocating for peace in ways that are more articulate than you're likely to hear in your own nation's Congress. Isn't that cause of concern? Isn't that why society is changing? And isn't the inability to accommodate this kind of discourse why we're experiencing so much censorship, so much decay, so much disarray in our cultural spaces? It's not for no reason that Joe Rogan's become the phenomenon that he has become. We could see it play out live there, sensitive, diplomatic, and considered at a point where those in positions of power making decisions with your tax dollars and the lives of real people around the world don't have an iota of the sensitivity that was just being displayed for a massive audience that the mainstream media are happy to dismiss as a basket of deplorables, as MAGA extremists, as meatheads, as Joe Rogan. They're very dismissive about that. What ought to happen in any sensible culture is that you should see that as a forum where ideas are exchanged in an interesting and meaningful way. And astonishing though it is to say it, we would be better off if Congress would believe our Joe Rogan book than the reverse. They're the ones pretending they're the adults. They're like, Joe Rogan, he doesn't have a time. I've got a newsroom back there. And people are like, well, Joe Rogan might be having kind of lots of conspiracy theories. What? Conspiracy theories like that's a war crime. Conspiracy theories like if you perpetuate a cycle of war, it will ultimately lead to the apocalypse. So, whether you think Kid Rock is an eccentric and Joe Rogan is a conspiracy theorist, is of course entirely up to you. But the fact is that Kid Rock's views are popular in Congress and indeed are currently literally informing policy. That's what's happening. He's not saying, I wish this had happened. Alas, that is happening. And Joe Rogan is reasoned, seasoned, a good communicator, a good thinker, and a diplomatic envoy. The truth is, we'd probably be better off in the hands of Joe Rogan than we would in the hands of Joe Biden. But that's just why I let me know what you think in the chat. See you in a second. Glitches! What? Okay, we got some interesting comments, Jamie Jan. Have to wonder if people with views like this would go to pieces if they actually saw a war firsthand. I wonder that myself, Jamie Jan, my friend in the local stream. Getting on all right over there, you waiting wonders. Have some glitches! I'm talking to you, little guys. I'm talking to you, hey, Sophie Sam. I'm talking to you, Super Incel. Own it. Curry King 3200, Alien from Mars, all of you lot. I welcome your free speech. Yeah, we hit that 20,000 even with the glitches, even with the cyber attacks. We just keep going, don't we? We cannot be stopped. Like many powerful fossil fuels, you know, the CEO of Exxon says it's your fault. It's your fault. Climate change. It's your fault. Have a look. The world isn't on track to meet its climate goals. Oh no, and it's the public's fault. A leading world company CEO told journalists. This is in a sense where organisations like WEF lead us to create change that doesn't impede the progress of powerful global corporations, but facilitates the ongoing blame and further control and regulation of what you might call ordinary people. I don't mean anyone who's not in charge of massive corporations. Exxon Mobil core CEO Darren Woods told editors from Fortune the world's way too long to begin investing in a broader suite of technology to grow and evil. He finds some chips.
Why? Mm.
That name, they're so eager to jump on this and amplify the threat of these conditions, convey the idea that Trump will make himself a dictator for life. Do you remember the one where he said, I'd be dictator for the day, which was so clearly a bloody joke? They keep using that. Hello, Rational Anarchy, you awakened wonder. Hello, Ruby C. Kinglet. God, I love you. Responds to this. He's one of them sort of. One of them, he really does.
The radical left Democrats are at it again. They're constantly making it absurd.
Okay, Bluebell, are you?
Why?
You've got a nasty lassie guy. My lassie guy is pretty good right now. I'm not very confident about it. But let's have a look at Trump's response. He seems like he
Democrats are at it again. They're constantly making it absurd.
okay, Bluebell, are you? And you've got a nasty lassie guy. My lassie guy is pretty good right now. I'm not very confident with that. Right, let's have a look at Trump's response. He seems on his game to me.
It's about me. Because their candidate is a men. Constantly making it absurd.
Okay, Bluebell, are you? And you've got a nasty lassie guy. My lassie guy is pretty good, 155 pounds. I'm not very confident with that. Right, let's have a look at Trump's response. He seems on his game to me.
It's about me. Because their candidate is a mental and physical basket case.
That's not it. It's sort of physical basket case.
President in the history of our country. He went on a very poorly rated show last night.
Every like, look, he's speaks this language, I think. Did you see it?
Oh, fuck.
The thing where Robert De Niro.
What? Where's this? Depends what midget actually look like when they wake up. Just saying. So watch the miracle transformation to get you how people like me. What? Oh God. Ugh. That was fucked up. Why the fuck did that happen? Huh? Huh? Fucking shit. Huh? What?
Donc, Justin Trudeau, la corruption ni le camouflage. Mais maintenant, on sait qu'il n'est pas capable de protéger les Canadiens. On vient de recevoir ces documents-là.
What?
Ces documents que Justin Trudeau voulait camoufler pendant des années.
What?
On sait maintenant pourquoi il voulait les camoufler. Les documents montrent que dans le laboratoire du gouvernement Trudeau, qui est responsable pour gérer et étudier les virus et pathogènes les plus dangereux. L'une des responsables pour le programme collaborait avec l'armée chinoise et spécifiquement les responsables de l'armée chinoise pour le bioterrorisme. Voici les constats que nous venons de recevoir. Regardez. Le scientifique du laboratoire de Winnipeg, Dr. Chu, qui dirigeait l'unité des pathogènes spéciaux, selon les documents à page 242,
Ouais.
représente un danger très grave et crédible pour le gouvernement du Canada dans son ensemble et en
Coffee there for
particulier
you.
dans les installations
Made you
considérées
coffee.
comme hautement sécurisées
Oh.
en raison du potentiel de vol de matières dangereuses qui attirent des terroristes et des entités étrangères qui font de l'espionnage pour s'infiltrer et nuire à la sécurité économique du Canada. Fin de citation. À la page 239, il est indiqué, et je cite, « Les enquêteurs estiment que Dr. Chu a communiqué avec des entités étrangères durant des voyages en Chine. Les preuves obtenues lors des entretiens et les informations collectées à partir du contenu électronique et des appareils révèlent que c'est effectivement le cas. En tant qu'expert en la matière ayant accès à des informations sensibles et à des matières dangereuses, Dr. Chu représente une menace réaliste et crédible pour la sécurité économique du Canada en organisant des réunions répétées et clandestines avec des entités étrangères. Fin de citation. Dr. Chu, et je répète, c'était le responsable du gouvernement Trudeau pour les virus et les pathogènes dans son laboratoire le plus sécurisé. A mené des recherches conjointes avec le Major général Chen Wang de l'Armée populaire de libération de Pékin, qui, selon les documents à la page 236, est considéré, et je cite, considéré comme le meilleur virologue de l'Académie des sciences médicales militaires et le principal expert chinois en matière de défense contre les armes biologiques, engagé dans des recherches liées à la biosécurité, à la biodéfense et au bioterrorisme. Fin de citation. Quand Justin Trudeau a obtenu ces documents-là, qu'est-ce qu'il a fait? Est-ce qu'il a informé le public? Non, il a camouflé. Il a dit que c'était pour les raisons de sécurité nationale. Il ne pouvait pas partager ça. Mais selon un comité des parlementaires et des juges, des parlementaires de tous les partis, y compris des libéraux, et 3 juges, c'était pas pour protéger la sécurité nationale. Le camouflage, c'était pour protéger la carrière politique de Justin Trudeau en évitant l'embarras. Et je cite le comité des 4 partis et des 3 juges. Les informations semblent avoir pour but principal de protéger l'organisation de l'embarras pour des échecs en matière de politique et de mise en œuvre et non de répondre à des préoccupations légitimes de sécurité nationale. Et leur divulgation est essentielle pour demander des comptes au gouvernement. Rappelons que le Parlement a demandé ces documents 4 fois. Justin Trudeau a refusé. Il a même poursuivi le président de la Chambre des communes pour empêcher la divulgation de ces documents-là, soi-disant pour les raisons de sécurité nationale, et on sait maintenant que c'était un mensonge. Puis ensuite, il a déclenché une élection soudaine, sans justification, dans laquelle la Chine a aidé Justin Trudeau à gagner. Et maintenant, il nous dit qu'il est capable de protéger notre sécurité nationale. C'est ridicule. C'est n'importe quoi avec lui. La réalité, c'est qu'il nous faut protéger notre système scientifique, nos laboratoires sensibles, mettre fin à l'espionnage et l'infiltration que Justin Trudeau a permis. Il faut avoir un premier ministre qui n'admire pas la dictature communiste de Pékin, comme Justin Trudeau dit faire, et un premier ministre qui va défendre notre pays. On va défendre notre pays contre les forces étrangères qui veulent nous nuire. Et on va rétablir le gros bon sens dans la gestion de notre gouvernement. Thank you very much, and now in English. We already knew that Justin Trudeau was not worth the cost, the crime, the corruption, and the cover-up. But now we know that he cannot protect our people or our country. We just received these documents that Trudeau has been covering up for years. Documents related to a massive security breach at the Trudeau government's most sensitive laboratory, where the most dangerous viruses and pathogens are studied and handled. We learned that the Trudeau government's head of pathogens was collaborating with members of Beijing's People's Liberation Army who were responsible for bioweapons and bioterrorism. We know now that a People's Liberation Army official is able to gain personal access, walk in the door,
Nice
Look
cough.
at computers.
I tried to
It
go back
has
to bed.
access to
I
all
saw.
of our
You didn't try very hard.
virological
there very long.
sequence. Let me, do you think
Tell
any of this
Wilma
is
when we go
hyperbole?
back.
Read the report yourself.
You can't really rock.
This is from
Yeah.
government documents, the Trudeau government's own documents. It says
No,
here on
it
page
goes in between.
142, Winnipeg Lab scientist Dr. Chu is
bar
head
right
of the
there.
Special Pathogens Unit, the top person in that job.
Don't go that far down.
According to documents on page 242, quote, represents a serious and credible danger to the government of Canada as a whole, and in particular at facilities considered high security due to potential for theft of dangerous materials attractive to
He's been crushed by my leg
and
before,
foreign
so.
entities that conduct espionage to infiltrate and damage the economic security of Canada, end quote. States further, page 239. Investigators assessed that Dr. Chu communicated with foreign entities during her trip to China. The evidence obtained from interviews and from information collected from the electronic content of her devices reveal that this is indeed the case.
Staring at
As a subject matter
Okay.
expert with access to sensitive
Because he's
information
expecting
and
the
dangerous
food
materials,
gods
Dr. Chu
to
presents a
food
realistic
gods?
dispense
and
of
credible threat
food.
to Canada's economic
Are we
security
food
by
gods?
conducting
Apparently.
repeated
Cool.
and clandestine meetings with foreign entities, end quote.
Even, what's her
Then,
name?
it says Dr. Chu conducted joint research
Russell and,
with the Major General
fucking, what's the other
Ken
one?
Wade of the
Carol.
People's Liberation Army, who according to page
Yeah.
236 is a noted top virologist at the Academy of Military Medical Sciences and is China's chief biological defense expert engaged in research related to biosafety, biodefense,
Only way tips.
and bio
I know there's probably
terrorism.
nothing different other than the color, but
You gonna smoke a sportsman
yeah,
bioterrorism,
why?
end quote.
instead of those?
These are documents. This
I
is
don't
right
like
out
white
of
tips.
Well, you don't like
the government's
sportsmen.
own documents. Trudeau,
like them more
what
than
did
white
he do when he
tips.
found out about this? Did he immediately inform Canadians of the breach?
Right.
Did he fire anybody?
Your way.
No one was fired.
Weirdo.
Did he call inquiry to get to the bottom of it? No, he didn't do
There
that
he comes
either.
Ben.
Why? I
Instead-
can't sleep on the couch.
He covered it all up.
What?
He defied 4
Said, I'm
parliamentary
coming
orders
up.
to
I
release
was
Yeah.
like, yay, I have the light
when
on.
the speaker tried to
Well,
get
you're
them.
still
He
up,
sued the
I
speaker.
thought, and then I took a
He
quick
said it's all for
shower.
national security, but well, we know from a committee
I was full
composed
of,
of 4
dust.
members of parliament, including 1 liberal, and 3 judges.
what's the matter
And I
with
quote,
you?
The information appears to be
Why
mostly
not?
about protecting the organization from embarrassment for failures in
I wanna
policy
wake you
and
up.
implementation,
Like,
not legitimate
wanna wake you
national
up.
security concerns. And its release is essential.
I want to have the TV on.
In other words,
But I
there's no
want to have the
national
TV
security
on,
reason
like-
why we couldn't have had this before.
Hey, we put the bed downstairs for you now.
Trudeau didn't want the embarrassment
Stop.
before an election. So what did he do then? He collaborated, knowing this, he collaborated with Beijing to buy a vaccine for COVID. Could you imagine if the deal that Trudeau wanted to sign with Beijing had gone ahead and we had procured China-made vaccines after learning this information? That's what was in this guy's head. And if you would think for a minute, because I know there'll be all kinds of excuses why he's not responsible and how could he possibly take ownership of what happens in his government. Let me quote him. He has a document called Open and Accountable Government. And I quote, as head of government, the Prime Minister has special responsibilities for national security, end quote. It's his responsibility. This is his government's lab. It's not a random university lab. It's the top lab for the Prime Minister's public health agency. And he is exclusively responsible for the machinery of government as Prime Minister of the country. So this is on Justin Trudeau. I will add one last thing. Not only did he cover it up, not only did he try to get a vaccine from China after knowing this, he called a snap election to make sure that the voting would happen before this came out. What happened in that election? Beijing interfered to help him win.
How the fuck did
This
they
is a
do
man who
that?
says he admires
Chinese
China's
people voted
basic
for him?
communist dictatorship.
Yeah.
We cannot trust Justin Trudeau to keep our people and its country safe. We need a strong, conservative, common sense government that will root out foreign interference, protect our critical secrets and our medical research, and stand on guard for our country to keep our people and our nation safe. Thank you.
On ArriveCan, there's a report by CTV that says that there's a man who runs a company that got $8 million for ArriveCan. He is still employed by the Department of National Defense. What does that say to you?
It says to me that there's no accountability. Now that we know this individual should be immediately fired, and there should be an immediate police investigation of his conduct and that of the company with which he's associated, and a broader inquiry within the public service about how this contracting was allowed to go on for so long.
On the Winnipeg lab, do you think the National Microbiology Lab infectious disease researchers should be allowed to do any collaboration with China at this point?
No.
Why?
Because we know that in this instance that our highest placed, most sensitive lab was infiltrated by people who collaborated with the People's Liberation Army, who did not reveal any of their ongoing partnerships with the regime in Beijing, and who transferred materials from our most critical lab containing these dangerous viruses over to Beijing and worked in collaboration with the Wuhan lab. So I don't think this is the kind of collaboration we want. We should be collaborating with like-minded democracies that we can trust, not those that want to attack our interests.
So as Mr. Polyev has said, the government's own documents have confirmed that the national security breaches at the Winnipeg lab represent a very serious and credible danger to Canada, and a realistic and credible threat to Canada's economic security. As Mr. Polyev has also said, in the government's own founding document, Open and Accountable Government, the Prime Minister alone is responsible for the machinery of government, and the Prime Minister has a special responsibility for national security. It is clear in these documents that the Prime Minister failed in his responsibility to protect the security of Canadians against a very serious threat against this country and its citizens. It's also clear that the Prime Minister failed to ensure that the machinery of government is set up in a way to ensure that these kinds of things did not happen at the Winnipeg lab. In addition to all this, what is equally appalling is the cover-up. It was 3 years ago that we asked for these documents. In fact, as Mr. Polyev has said, the House of Commons and its two committees issued 4 orders for the production of these documents 3 years ago. It was 4 years ago that these scientists were marched out of the lab in Winnipeg. And during these last 4 years, the government covered it up. It initially, as you'll recall, tried to punt this to the NSICOP committee. And then it took the speaker to court. And then it actually created this ad hoc committee of 4 MPs and 3 judges that took another year and a half to review these documents. So this has been a massive cover-up on part of the government, particularly appalling, in light of the fact that this is a government that came into office promising greater transparency. We have seen anything but. In fact, it has been said by information commissioners that we've seen a reversal in transparency on part of this government, probably one of the worst reversals in modern government, Canadian government history. We've also have a government here that promised to respect Parliament. And here we are, 3 years after we asked for these documents, and finally starting to get some of the truth behind what happened. And so this is a damning indictment on this Prime Minister, his management of the government of Canada, and his lack of respect for our democracy. Everyone, Canadians need
What
to
are they
know
doing?
that
These guys just fucking rolling on our grass again.
many institutions inside the
You put that little snowman a little further because guys in front and the other lawn, and this guy rolling on our fucking gravel.
Liberation Army scientists from the Academy of Military Medical Scientists, which is charged with biology-enabled weapons,
Branches.
were able to gain a secret security clearance, which gave them unfettered and unsupervised access to the laboratory and to the computer-based science.
Oh, down the street.
This
Okay.
is a travesty and a breach of security.
I'm cleaning up all the
highest
shit
levels
down.
not tolerated. Aside from all this, we know very clearly that the Trudeau Liberal government
Well, I think
wants to cover this
Hydro
up
came
behind
first, and then Roxboro's picking up the
taking the speaker to court and
3 fucking huge truck and 2 tractor.
which of course resulted in us understanding now very clearly that there was Chinese interference in that election. Canadians need to know also that this was not a national security threat cover-up. It was a cover-up to avoid political embarrassment. This is an embarrassment to our country.
Oh my God.
We also need to know who is going to be held responsible in this Sunny Ways government. Who covered this up? Who is at the head from a political nature? Why did they cover up for so long? And when will someone, such as a minister or a prime minister, be held responsible on behalf of all Canadians? I think. Just one more thing we just want to add to this is as we actually look at this and you think about the documents that we all took a lot of time last night going through and the cover-up that we've been going under for the last 3 years because of disruption and his cover-ups. We got to remember that if you look at page 97, paragraph number 5 in the CSIS document, it says, and this is where this gets really critical here when it comes to our national security, the Academy of Military Medical Sciences of the People's Liberation Army of the People's Republic of China and has offensive, chemical, and biological weapons capabilities. As for China's key national research and development priorities is to support national defense research projects by transforming the results of basic civil research into military applications. So although you have Justin Trudeau not at all concerned about our national security, more concerned about his political embarrassment, us as conservatives under Pierre Poilievre want to make sure that we continue to go out there and support our national security and make sure that this never happens again. We don't know exactly what materials, technology, viruses, and other biological things that are in that lab were actually turned over to the PRC and to the People's Liberation Army. We know that they're interested in weaponization. And so we cannot have these biological weapons created in China and used against us here in Canada or our allies. You want to talk about an embarrassment? This is a national embarrassment. It's an international embarrassment, and our own national security is at risk.
Let me just say that this is a national security failure on the highest level. The head of the unit at the Winnipeg lab responsible for pathogens was collaborating with the foremost expert in the TLA with respect to biodefense and bioterrorism. And through it all, the Prime Minister was less than transparent with Canadians, and he covered it up. And the question is, who bears responsibility? And the answer to that question is very simple. Justin Trudeau bears responsibility. The buck stops with Justin Trudeau. As Prime Minister, he has special responsibilities for national security. And he has a lot to answer for this colossal failure that occurred under his watch.
Devrait-il y avoir un droit de retrait pour le Québec, l'Alberta et toutes les autres provinces avec pleine compensation et sans condition sur l'assurance médicale?
Premièrement, il faut reconnaître que c'était notre promesse des gouvernements néo-démocrates libéral. On verra ce que ça va livrer. Ils ont promis un grand programme de 80 milliards de dollars pour rendre le logement abordable et juste un coup à doubler le coût de logement. Donc, nous verrons ce que le programme va livrer. Pas juste des belles paroles, des photos et des ententes entre des deux politiciens incompétents. Est-ce qu'il devrait pouvoir se retirer? The question was on Mexican visas. The Harper government put in the visa for Mexico, which all but eliminated false asylum claims from that country. When Prime Minister Harper left office, there were 250 asylum claims per year from Mexico. After Justin Trudeau got in and lifted the visa requirement, that rose to 17,000, of which only 11% were actually found to be legitimate asylum claimants. The rest were presumably illegitimate. And as a result, we have the social services and our housing market completely overwhelmed with false claimants. We called, first of all, that the visa never should have been lifted by Trudeau. He's the one that caused the chaos in our immigration system. He and he alone is to blame for it. We called for him to reverse his mistake a month ago. Finally, he has backed down to me on that demand. And I only wish that he had done it sooner. I should do that in French, en français. Évidemment, le gouvernement Harper a mis en place l'obligation de visa pour le Mexique, ce qui a presque éliminé les faux demandeurs d'asile. En fait, il y avait seulement 250 demandeurs d'asile dans la dernière année de Stephen Harper. Il y a maintenant
After hearing all of this, I don't believe in
17 000 demandeurs d'asile. 17 000.
My dad's been telling me that since I was a
Et
child.
dont 11% sont trouvés légitimes. Donc, l'autre 89% ne sont pas. Ça a débordé le système de services sociaux et de logement, surtout au Québec. Le Québec est à un point de rupture à cause de l'incompétence de Justin Trudeau en ce qui concerne notre système de l'immigration. C'est pour ça qu'on a demandé il y a un mois que Justin Trudeau rétablisse le visa qu'il a enlevé et finalement il a cédé à la pression conservatrice pour remettre le visa. Il n'aurait jamais fait cette erreur et maintenant les Canadiens en paient le prix. Il n'en vaut pas le coup. Justin Trudeau is not worth the cost.
Will you dismantle pharmacare?
Thank you very much.
Will you dismantle pharmacare? Will you not answer more of our questions?
Oh, fuck off. What? Huh?
January 19th. Idris.
Huh? Huh? Oh, ho, ho, ho. Oh, ho. You get the butt.
And then you get the face.
Oh, that dog fucking loves him. I'm glad he kept her.
Super happy.
I'm really glad he kept her.
Super happy.
She looks really happy. But you know, like, I think he just needed her.
Yeah.
As much as she,
you.
like, as much as she needs him, like he needs her. Like, he needs something to be responsible for. Like, and that dog obviously loves the fucking crap out of him. Like,
I sent her a message. Oh wow, she looks very happy. There you go. Okay, there you go. We'll roll a joint before I start feeding them.
I love you.
So cute.
She is very cute. She's got big ears.
Flashbacks can also be really, really vivid. You might feel as though you're reliving it and having reactions within you like it's happening in current time. Some people, when they have flashbacks, may feel like they're seeing images. You might even be pulled in by other sensations like sounds or smells. You may feel bodily or somatic sensations that are similar to the trauma you experienced. This idea I hear from clients often. My heart is still racing when I see this person. I thought I was over it, but maybe I'm not over. my narcissistic relationship. This is something I hear quite often. I'll be working with a client, a group of clients who've done well, much more healed. Maybe they're even somewhat indifferent to the narcissist. They're living a fuller life. They no longer feel gaslighted. They don't feel silenced or invalidated. In some cases, people may have even moved on into new relationships, new careers, and they feel happy. And then, for some reason of bad luck, they run into their narcissist. It could be something like a coincidental sighting at a grocery store. It may be a necessary sighting, someplace like a family wedding. It may be that you see them at a work event, or I don't know, it might even be something as bizarre as that you're sitting in traffic at a red light and you turn around and they're in the car next to you. Just sheer coincidence.
The worst.
But no matter where it is, you see them and your heart starts to race. And it feels like your heart's in your throat. You may feel like you can't catch your breath. You feel sick to your stomach. You may feel dizzy. It's an awful feeling. The moment will pass, and maybe at that moment you're able to duck into a doorway and they don't even see you. You just see them. Or maybe they just keep walking past you, even if they do notice you.
Hello and welcome to Automator's Edge, your source for the latest in control news and automation education.
Your heart keeps racing, and then slowly you return back to normal. Then, though, psychologically, you start to feel upset and perhaps even angry with yourself. You're thinking, what the hell? I thought I was over this. I thought I was past this whole experience. And this isn't just about intimate relationships. This can even be family members, former bosses, old friends. It can be someone you went no contact with, but as a result, you just couldn't account for the random coincidence of possibly seeing them in an airport or a train station, or just simply walking across the street. You get frustrated thinking to yourself, I did all of this damn work and I'm still not over it. You might start to feel hopeless. Well, I'm here to offer you a little reassurance. You're actually more over it than you think. But your sympathetic nervous system didn't read the memo. Your narcissist was a source of fear and confusion for years. Maybe in not all cases was it fear of violence, but in some cases I know it was. But just fear. You had fear of saying the wrong thing, fear that you would be invalidated, fear of being gaslighted, fear of being lied to, fear of being betrayed, fear of always feeling confused. These are relationships that are characterized by months, years, and lifetimes spent walking on eggshells. If you actually do feel you're out of the woods psychologically, you may very well be. The cognitive work of narcissistic abuse is a little bit easier. You're able to think reasonably and rationally, the usual stuff. You're able to manage expectations, engage in radical acceptance, and with time, you slowly see the pattern that it was, that it is, and it always would be, so you get it. But your sympathetic nervous system doesn't catch up so quick. The sympathetic nervous system is our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn system. It's that part of us that is mobilized at times of fear to get us to a place of safety. When we see or experience something frightening, the sympathetic nervous system starts. It doesn't stop and say, well, let's think a little bit about radical acceptance and all the rest of it. It sees and processes any kind of dangerous stimulus almost immediately. And the racing heart and the other physiological symptoms are part of that mobilization. It's your brain and body kind of doing what they're supposed to. And all of this involves a variety of brain structures, such as the insula, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. All of these are involved in the processing of fear. This is happening at a primitive level. Now, it can be really demoralizing when you have these strong sympathetic reactions, because as I said, many people think that their heart racing means that they're not over it. Don't worry. It's just a signal that this was once frightening. In some ways, when you run into your narcissist, it's sort of a combination of post-traumatic stress and a phobia. They're often not something to be afraid of anymore. Like, for example, when we think of phobias, a person afraid of dogs isn't just afraid of snarling and dangerous dogs, but they're sometimes even afraid of tiny little teacup dogs.
Ridiculous.
The fear of dogs get generalized, and it's not rational.
Yeah.
Your poor nervous system is just doing its job, but it generalizes, right? So I don't want you to perceive your racing heart as a signal that you have not healed. If you really have healed and are feeling more indifferent, the fact that you got out of one of these relationships is nothing short of heroic. Now, trauma researchers and trauma clinicians have great suggestions for how to manage these moments, these traumatically activating moments when they happen. In a classical example, trauma researchers often suggest connecting to your body so you can bring down the fear. So let's say you see your narcissist and your pulse starts skyrocketing.
I saw the funniest shit once. It was like this chick who was trying to be like, there's like a series of patterns that you can do of like tapping on your face and like super weird fucking shit. And she's like, it's been scientifically proven that it'll stop your panic attack. I'm like, this is literally just you're you're basically distracting yourself autistic that. Or like if you're like your emotions are not in check, like, and you're trying to focus your attention on something else.
Autistic people love that. You do that to other autistic people, so they start having a tantrum. Our ex-girlfriend's brother, Shane. The way they were distracting him to stop having a tantrum. It's like, you want to write down the grocery list? You want to write down the next grocery list? He's like, and he takes a pen and he looks everywhere in the cupboard to see what's missing. That's pretty much the only way you were getting him to stop having a tantrum.
Positive what they used to do with Alec, because they used to say, "We'll call police," and he would freak out like, no, like. But it's because he went into the neighbor's house once. And they were upstairs, and they just heard someone like going around downstairs, so they stayed upstairs and called police for a break and entering. But he was like 8 or 9, he was a little kid, like, and like nothing happened or anything. Like they didn't fucking try to like they didn't try to arrest him or put cuffs on him or anything like that. They thought it was a child, and they're like, oh, it's misunderstanding. But he was like that scared the shit out of him. They know that he knows the police are like the authority. Like, and they go after bad guys, so.
Yeah, so then he realized he's a bad guy, so he stopped.
Yeah, so he thinks he's doing something bad, like. But
no, I'm not gonna say that.
I did it to him at first, like I was using it at first, and then like I realized that it was what? But it would put him into a panic. He would he started having a panic attack. I'm like, this is not. It's kind of cruel, like, to do to a child, because it makes him start freaking out, and it's just to get him to do what I want him to do.
What?
What? What's he doing?
There's a wire in front of him. He's like, well, I'm going to start sniffing the wire. And he sniffs the wire, and it starts to tickle his face. He's like, wire. And he goes away from the wire.
Mo. Hi. What's up, weekend?
Ooh. You. Oh, you. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, you. Oh. Too much?
Absolutely.
He does like me. Like when I wake up and I get on the first time on the vertical position, I'm like, oh. His ears?
Is your face? Can I see your face? There's no cut.
Just puts his face on the ground.
You just want to see your face.
Ah, fuck. What? You thought I was gonna hurt you?
Yes. I thought you were gonna kill me.
Or put you in the street, you and all your family. That's what she said, right? All the ones you love.
Or
Put you in the street, all the people you love.
Well, at least I didn't want my boyfriend over. Truth hurts.
That's harsh.
Well, that's what happens when you let your loved ones do heroin. They die. And it's partially your fault because you let them. If not explicitly encouraged them. So, yeah, a little harsh.
Okay, so I'm just gonna call her when I get there. Just give her a number. She's a little. She works in drop-in center.
That's cool.
She's cool.
Religious?
She's a little eccentric.
Religious?
No, she's punk rocker.
Really?
Yeah. So, well, I say that, but Jean-Marc in Saint-Hyacinthe is very much punk rocker and is super religious. So.
We used to hang out at a Christian drop-in center. I mean, fair.
I don't think it's a Christian drop-in center. I think it's outreach, something like the bad people.
Hmm?
No, that's right. Sorry, I'm so sorry. She works into recovery center.
Really?
So, yeah, the drug addiction that you go there and then you have to stop. Yes.
Should ask her about my brother.
Yes, she's. Oh.
Because I don't know where to put him. And eventually it's going to be the hospital. But, like for me personally, like
she's tall like this. She's like a little not fat, but a little
chunky.
She loves fucking metal and like hardcore punk rock.
That's
and
cool.
Like doesn't fit your. Oh yeah, thought you want to bark in mommy's ear? Here. Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? Oh.
Oi. Hey. Relax. Jack?
Maybe it's not a good idea.
Chill.
Too much for you. Sorry.
You're gonna fucking give yourself a heart attack.
Like the first bark you give, you almost choked to death.
Relax. Where's this golf ball? Go upstairs. The orange one he likes. Yeah, probably. Ah.
Like, I got one. And he lays down. Fucking douchebag. Douchebag. Don't, Tom have a printer?
We have a printer.
Huh?
We have a printer.
Doesn't he have a printer?
No, I have it.
You have it? It's not working.
It does work. I set it up. I've been saying this since we moved in.
You said there's no ink in it. No?
I'm not sure anymore. No, there's the new one. The one that was here when we moved in.
Oh, did it have ink in it?
It did have ink in it.
Oh, but he wasn't printing the right thing or something. You just have to set it up.
Yeah.
Want me to set my computer?
Yeah, okay. What? Yeah. Are they seashells?
Yeah.
Cool.
She sells crack on the seashore. Sorry, that's not this. She sells seashell and seashore.
What you got? Shut up.
Yeah, right?
Jack, what you doing? Oh, he ran away.
She sells crack on the seashore.
That there was no evidence ultimately of any of the sort of like potential things that he could be charged with. So Joe Biden but there were other elements of the report that Joe Biden obviously stuck in his craw. One being that in the report, it was claimed that he forgot when Beau Biden died.
Yeah,
and
no.
It basically said, and we should say, it didn't say that he was an old man who couldn't remember things. It said that they weren't going to bring charges in part because a jury would find him sympathetic as an old man who couldn't remember things. Nonetheless, Joe Biden ran apparently to insist upon having a press conference about it. Here's how it started, and it got worse after this, but let's play this. What are we starting? About 20 seconds in or so?
Yeah, I mean, this was the emergency press conference that he called. The
You got-
emergency.
Yeah.
And when you hear that kind of thing, you
You
think,
got-
oh my God, there's like a massive international development. Perhaps he's making a shift on Israel, was
This
my
like
wishful
at
thinking.
7:30, was it at?
Oh
I don't
my
know.
God,
It's
yeah, I
been
get a
solid,
notification
so-
on my phone, like, let's turn on cable. There's some big news happening. And really, it's just Biden is upset about the editorializing in the special counsel report.
Let me say a few things before I take questions. As you know, the special counsel released this finding today about their look into my handling of
Barely
classified
talk.
documents. I was pleased to see he reached a firm conclusion that no charges should be brought against me in this case. This was an exhaustive investigation going back more than 40 years, even in the 1970s when I was still a new United States Senator. The special counsel acknowledged I cooperated. I did not throw up any roadblocks. I sought no delays. In fact, I was so determined to give the special counsel what he needed, I went forward with a 5-hour in-person interview over 2 days on October the 8th and 9th of last year. Even though Israel had just been attacked by Hamas on the 7th, and was very occupied. It was in the middle of handling an international crisis. I was especially pleased to see special counsel make clear
He'll probably just end
the
up saying,
stark
like,
distinction
or just still do it
between
Monday.
this case and Mr. Trump's case. Special counsel wrote, and I quote, "Several material distinctions between Mr. Trump's case and Mr. Biden's are clear," continuing to quote, "Most notably, after given multiple chances to return classified documents to avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for many months, but obstructed justice by enlisting others to destroy evidence and then to lie about it. In contrast, he went on to say Mr. Biden turned in classified documents to the National Archives and Department of Justice, consented to the search of multiple locations, including his home, sat for a voluntary interview, and in other ways cooperated with the investigation," end of quote. I've seen the headlines since the report was released about my willful retention of documents. These assertions are not only misleading, they're just plain wrong. On page 215, if you had a chance, I know it's a thick document.
Yeah, you did read it.
215, the report of the special counsel found the exact opposite.
No, I think that's about all he could do. I think they load him up with blow
Shortage of evidence.
or probably some kind of amphetamine
materials related to
so
Afghanistan.
that he could focus.
On
Or
page
he has
12,
stimulant.
special counsel also wrote for another document.
Oh, yeah, is that so?
The decision to decline criminal charges was straightforward.
What?
The evidence suggests that Mr. Biden did not willfully retain these documents. The evidence says I did not willfully retain these documents.
Why do you receive
In
fucked up
addition,
messages on
I know there's some attention paid
like
to
1
some
0
language
0
in my
transfer,
recollection
money
of that.
transfer of 2005.
There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, was any of those
The landlord's like, I will come Saturday, or is it Sunday? Should I say Sunday?
Some of you comment, I wear since the day he died, every single day, the rosary he got from Our Lady.
He doesn't even know what shoe we are. That's why.
Every Memorial Day, we hold a service remembering him, attended by friends and family and the people who loved him. I don't need anyone to remind me when he passed away or he passed away.
Now, this would have been fine if he just wrapped it up here and then left, frankly. But he didn't, and we will play some other clips from it later. But to make the, we'll talk more about with Ryan Grimm. But to go on basically primetime television or close to it and do this is just one of the most blinkered sort of political moves that I think I've ever witnessed.
So they just
What are you eating?
they thought maybe we could get a win out of this or something like
I don't think it is almost unfathomable to me that a professional political advisor would have done anything other than I don't know if we should do this. This really feels like Biden was like, I'm going to get out there. This sounds like, honestly, hubris, and which you would anticipate.
What?
But it also.
How can I help you?
It also sounds like, conversations that I've had with people around maybe you don't need to drive. Yeah. The full 3 hours. Right. Maybe we'll have somebody else drive.
I mean, the quote is, right? The quote that he said, and I'm an elderly man and I know what the hell I'm doing. That's what it sounds like if, you're putting, grandpa in the car, or grandpa wants to drive. But what I think is where it says his priorities are, he's rushing to the podium and making an emergency address, which is one of the first. Is this the first time he's done this in his presidency because he's paranoid or upset about the claims about his age and that being used against him politically? And that is where he thinks he needs to use the bully pulpit, where he needs to.
What?
I'm blocking those numbers.
Okay, go for it.
you like finally speak to the public or landmine.
Their meditations range.
Days.
I'm gonna fucking. You can do it, Jack. Good job.
Case of like Fox News cycles. Mueller would do some of it as well, but this, I mean, that was hilariously egregious. On the other hand, none of that stuff lands if it doesn't land, right? Like if the public, if he said that about Barack Obama, he would just be laughed out of the room.
Oh no, it plays into a narrative. It totally plays into a narrative that has already been pre-existing. I mean, he's playing.
Not a normal prosecutor. This is a Republican dude who Democrats,
I'm working on it,
in their infinite wisdom, decided to hand a whole bunch of power to, and now they're upset that the Republican used the power Democrats gave them to hurt Democrats.
But Ryan, you're not understanding the electoral impact of demonstrating to the public that this Department of Justice will be different than Trump's Department of Justice because we'll be independent. And so it's our time to put Republican special prosecutors in charge of investigations into me and to my son. And then that means that everyone will realize we're reasonable and that will carry the day electorally.
There you go. This all goes, and it all goes back to this like impulse to just kind of own Republicans by making Merrick Garland the Attorney General. Like they wanted to do it simply because it was unfair that he was kept off the Supreme Court and like William. And Doug Jones was like inches away from being Attorney General, and you would have a completely different situation, I think, if Doug Jones had been Attorney General.
Radically different.
And I don't know if you remember, but during the transition, I got my hands on private video of this like hour-long meeting that Biden had with civil rights leaders, where he was like berating them and like there was a bunch of interesting like news nuggets from it. But one of the things in there, he was like, "Look, I'm being pressured to name an African American man or woman to be Attorney General." He's like, "That's not going to happen, but I promise you, I'm going to love who I named to the Attorney General. He has prosecuted the Klan. He has," and he described like a bunch of other things, like all of which perfectly fit Doug Jones and do not fit Merrick Garland. So something happened in the span of like a week where they didn't choose Doug Jones, or he was just lying. I don't think he was just straight up lying. I think they were leaning towards Jones, and then they went with Merrick Garland instead. And Merrick Garland then drags his feet on all these Trump prosecutions. And then when he eventually does it, he's like, "Well, I guess I got to prosecute Biden too," and appoints a Republican who then does this.
Let's play this clip of Biden where he starts taking questions. I mean,
you're right, because Barry's came today.
In my mind, political mistake here was to hold this press conference
at
7:30 at night Eastern time at all.
Today.
Frankly. I mean, it's one thing to put out a statement and then maybe come back and do a press conference in the morning. But this just doesn't make any sense to me.
It's not that much
and
of a rush.
even here, he's got a good line with us, but he's not.
3 a.m. after tomorrow. He's gonna come Saturday.
Well, let's play this and then we'll just
And something special
So we're gonna have the
report is that one of the reasons we were not charged is because in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor.
Yeah, it's just so that we know what he's bringing.
I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing as a president. I put this country back on its feet.
I thought you said
don't need the recommendation.
Well, either way, I need to print stuff. The form for your birth certificate.
Remember.
All right, that was a pretty good laugh line. I mean, he could have. I would have delivered it in a slightly different way, but it's a pretty good laugh line. But the idea of like going out there and even like addressing this stuff as if it's like such an emergency at 7:30 at night, that's what sort of like hyped it all up. right? I mean,
right.
There's a real quality to this that it feels like Joe Biden got pissed off at these things and said, I'm going to go do this. And there's nobody in the White House to go, maybe we need to count to 10 and approach this in a much more sort of like, because, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Ronald Reagan, in his debate about age, he was asked a question about age, and he said, I'm not going to hold, I think it was Mondale's, I'm not going to hold Mondale's youth against him. And he flipped the whole thing around, and with just a little bit of time, they could have done that exact same thing. You want to bring them out, have it work in your advantage. This is one of the most defensive things I've ever seen for something that, frankly, I don't think anybody even cared about.
It does show an enormous amount of defensiveness. Yes, and you have been hearing for years stories of Biden's temper, and once in a while it flashes out in public. But people who've worked with him over the decades have said that that's one of the defining things about him in private is this really rough temper, and you could see that he was seething last night, and you can only imagine how much he was seething like an hour before or an hour and a half before, when he basically probably browbeat the staff into making sure that they did have this press conference, which to your point does make it seem like he's a bit desperate.
I mean, it's like, what's the urgency here? The whole country's not sitting with bated breath and like, oh my God, the president has not been indicted.
But that's what I said earlier. This is an indication of his priorities. He's not holding emergency press conferences about the genocide. He's not holding emergency press conferences about any other international or national emergency. This is what got him all riled up. I think they invoked his son. That's a source that's a sore spot for him. But also what's frustrating is we can all see that he is not the same guy he was 10 years ago. And there's a quality of what Sam, you were kind of alluding to earlier. It's like Grandpa wants to drive and I'm an elderly man and you're not going to tell me that I can't drive. And his having a temper or being a little bit emotional in some of these things when some triggers happen for him. And that complete political malpractice last night it's an indication, one, of the priorities, and two, I think, of what the conversations in the White House are about. And it's really not about the things that really matter, honestly, to voters and to just the country.
Yeah, and there's also always been this sense out there in the conventional wisdom that, Biden is the nominee, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. And that might even be true at this date, but it hasn't been true before. You can imagine a world a couple months ago in which you had statements from, David Axelrod came out and he kind of, showed a little leg on the idea that maybe somebody else should run against Biden. If that was followed up by Chuck Schumer, saying he agreed with that, by Dick Durbin saying he agreed with that, by Hakeem Jeffries, Steny Hoyer, telling reporters he agreed with that, it's the entire calculation. So the idea that it couldn't be done was always a lie, and Biden understands that. And so I think Biden was worried that the combination of his non-meetings with like Mitterrand, whoever else he thought he accidentally mentioned not having spoken to, combined with this, create the potential
I would do that by
moves to explore the possibilities of something going on.
The idea that Chuck Schumer is going to stick his neck out, even a centimeter, not even a millimeter. Dick Durbin's not even, he's afraid to subpoena, people who have corrupted the real leader.
That's not me, is it?
What? No, that's me.
Okay.
I don't know.
No, that's not me. I don't do that.
What is it?
See another one.
What?
Full cup coffees.
Oh. That one's not me.
That's not me. It was on top of here.
Yeah, I didn't put it there.
Or maybe it was the last bit of coffee.
Maybe.
We did, and I left it there.
Because you left the thing on last night.
This?
Mm-hmm. And I'll have a little bit in it.
I have to remember it's something you don't.
Dites oui à la Honda Civic.
Oui! Honda Civic! I have to go along with it. It's not that good.
Fidelity Investments.
Including
It's not a good name for a company.
to Ebola. The CSIS reports, and I quote, Dr. Chu is a very serious and credible danger to the government of Canada due to the potential for theft of dangerous materials attracted to terrorists and foreign entities that conduct espionage to infiltrate and damage the economic security
more than
of
just
Canada.
interference with
And
election.
yet, under this Liberal Prime Minister, nothing was done to protect Canadians.
Paul, Pierre probably have came with a big book.
Had enough of this
And he said it's all proof that Justin Trudeau for the past at least 10 years has been stealing from Canadians and doing foreign deals with like China that were like off the books. And like that's like all of Lachine. It was like some Asian guy who like I'm pretty sure it was Caitlin and Alan's landlord once. The guy didn't show up for 3 months, and like all the people in the building went to because Alan and Caitlin were doing the janitorial, and all the tenants were going to Caitlin and Alan being like, "Where's the landlord? I gave him my fucking rent like 2 weeks ago, and he still never accepted it. Like it still wasn't like approved. And 3 months, yeah, because all like everyone did e-transfers at the time. Jack. Everyone was doing e-transfers. But like 3 months later, he showed up. I was like, 3 months of rent, please.
Husband, father, and friend, his life was committed to public service. Together, the two of them inspired me, and I think
But Dom knows them.
For their good works. Thank you.
The guy had a gambling problem.
Well, what do you want me to say?
The honorable member from Hamilton Center. Mr. Speaker, I rise to honor a distinguished MEP colleague and steadfast servant of Elmwood Transcona. As the honorable member steps down from his parliamentary seat, we reflect on
That's why we have a bunch of buildings that are fucking vacant and falling apart.
A passionate advocacy for workers' rights, and a relentless pursuit of justice defined best by his prairie brand of democratic socialism. The always honorable member's proud roots in Winnipeg, deeply entwined with his family's legacy of public service, laid a foundation for his principled approach to government. He brought to this House and our caucus a rare combination of intellectual depth and practical wisdom, shaped by the background as an electrician and proud member of IBW Local 2085. His legacy in Parliament has been one of reason, compassion, and solidarity, especially for those on the margins of society. My brother, you have always been more than just a friend and a colleague, and your presence here will be profoundly missed. Thank you for your service.
The honourable member for
Like fucking just like dying.
The honourable member for Labelle. Today, I would like to pay tribute to an exceptional man from my riding, Gaunt Labelle, a rare pearl.
Fuck, I hate when they do this.
Who is a volunteer and has been a volunteer for 60 years in volunteer sport. Monsieur Pierre Fournel got the Lieutenant Governor's Medal last January. His candidacy for this high distinguishment was chosen logically because of his strong devotion. He spread his passion.
Saskatchewan is home to some of the highest quality and most sustainably produced food, fuel, and fertilizer
Okay,
that a growing
and that's
world
it.
needs. Our 4 pillars tell an impressive
That is
story of
basically what
sustainability.
makes up Saskatchewan. Yes.
This week in Alabama,
And there's nothing
2
else.
illegal aliens were arrested as part of a child trafficking sex.
You what? You want a grocery store?
Last week
Nah.
in Georgia, a young girl with a
But
bright
you can
future ahead
never
of her
crops. You can make your
was
own food.
murdered by an illegal alien. The list of tragedies is growing, and it's past time to do something about it. I signed the Immigration Accountability Project pledge to oppose all government funding until the action is taken to secure our southern border. Instead of kicking the can down the road with another CR, the number one priority of this Congress should be funding Trump's wall and defunding this invasion. We must fund President Trump's wall and defund Biden's backdoor contributions to organizations that are sending illegals to a city near you. It should not take more than one tragedy for a border to become priority. It is time to finish Trump's wall, protect Americans. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Reserve. Gentleman from Texas, reserved. Gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserved. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Still 1 minute, my friend, Missouri.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you to my good friend from Texas, Mr. White. Well, America, here we go again. Today, the House is set to extend the bloated and inflationary spending levels that have left our country $34 trillion in debt and fuels a government that is at war with the American people. This is now the 4th time that we've kicked the can down the road since just last September. It's now the 4th time that we've shrugged our shoulders and said, sorry, America, we just don't have the fight in us this time, but we'll try again next time. We all promised we wouldn't do this crap when we got up here. The American people have demanded responsible spending and border security for years, but we failed them. When will we heed the calls of our constituents to rein in the wasteful spending, secure the borders, and defeat the bureaucracy targeting them? You know, the last line of the Declaration of Independence has a bold and courageous statement by the people who signed it. They said, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Sadly, we're not serving with those people today with the same resolve. I urge my colleagues to vote against
going
this
through
CR.
puberty?
Gentleman from Texas reserved. Gentlelady from
It
Texas.
sounds like
It
you're
is
gonna
not
cry.
following the law. It is not enough to impeach, send to the Senate, sit back and grab the popcorn and watch. We have a duty to actually defund tyranny and lawlessness. That is precisely what the founders said. It is what the founders wrote into the Federalist Papers. It is what they contemplated in Article 1 of the Constitution. And do not go out and have talking points about dead Americans because of what this administration is doing, letting people into this country to kill Americans like Lincoln Riley last week, and then write the check that funds their broken policies. I yield back.
It's Kylie, not
Remainder of
Riley.
this time, the gentlelady from Texas is recognized to close.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 7463? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I demand the yeas and nays.
Sorry. I'm sorry. The lady from Texas demands the yeas and nays. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Motion to suspend the rules and pass the following bills: H.R. 7102, H.R. 7463, and H.R. 7454. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, remaining electronic votes will be conducted as a 5-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Williams, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1102, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title. H.R. 7102.
HR 7102, an Office of Native American Affairs within the Small Business Administration and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
Oh my god,
J'aimerais
really?
nager dans le monde de l'aérospatial.
The Honorable Minister for Health. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that an attack on our national security by foreign nations, be it China or Russia, represents an attack on democracy. It represents a direct attack on every member of this House. And I share his outrage that China or any country would attempt to interfere in our process. The Public Health Agency, which is one of the most respected agencies in the world, hired 2 Canadian citizens who were eminent and well-known scientists in Canada who lied. It is the Public Health Agency that discovered that. It is the Public Health Agency that fired them, and that's why there's now an RCMP investigation about their actions. The Honourable Member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
The documents, Mr. Speaker, reveal a shocking disregard for Canada's national security. They reveal a government that is completely asleep at the switch on national security and the machinery of government. They reveal government employees collaborating with Beijing's government and with the biological weapons unit of the People's Liberation Army. Equally shocking are the health minister's comments. He said yesterday, there was no evidence of actual breaches at the lab, and no sensitive information actually left the country. The documents say otherwise. Does the minister stand by those comments?
The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, the 2 Canadian scientists in question were well known for their work in virology and had spent their time working on health treatments for those that were suffering from viruses. Their collaboration, there's absolutely no evidence of the thing that the member opposite is suggesting. And I do not
Where
think
is Trudeau and Christopher Freeland?
to suggest that they were involved with weaponization or things of this nature. When they have all the documents, they can see all the information. We have waived all the normal
Is Trudeau ever at work?
not only of national security, Mr. Speaker, but of employee relationships that normally are kept confidential. It was our
Horrible lie.
That's why they have this information. The Honourable Member from Cumberland, Colchester.
Speaker, scientists working with Ebola at Canada's only level 4 lab collaborated with the People's Republic of China Army Major General. Sadly, the story does not end there. Dr. Chu was able to gain access to the lab for students from China, and it gets worse. A scientist from the Academy of Military Medical Sciences, the research arm of the PLA, known to work on biology-enabled. How did so many citizens from a hostile superpower gain access to Canada's top lab? Is it because the Prime Minister admires China's basic dictatorship?
The Honourable Minister of Health. Some will attempt to national security concerns to play partisan games. I think that's unfortunate. And let me just give an example. With respect to Ebola, the exchange of Ebola in 2019 was done in the context of trying to work with China and other countries on finding solutions to Ebola, which exists in so many different parts of the country. At that moment in time in 2019, the relationship with China was in a different place. The information that was shared was through legitimate channels. It has nothing to do with this issue. It was absolutely known and handled with complete control. I think it's very, very important to not mischaracterize national security for partisan interest. I'd like to remind all members
members to ensure that they choose language which would be unparliamentary.
Unparliamentary. Buddy, you're unparliamentary.
Cumberland Colchester.
Speaker, that minister's comments are reckless and untrue. Before March 31st, 2019, the PRC did not have a containment level 4 lab. How can I be so specific about the date? This is the date on which a scientist at Canada's top lab, the National Microbiology Lab, shipped dangerous pathogens, including Ebola virus, to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This scientist had a history of visiting and collaborating with the PLA since 2016. When did the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister know about the espionage and blatant violation of our sovereignty? And when did they decide to cover it up?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
The exact opposite of a cover-up. It's actually this government that created the process that released these documents. So they were actually refused to participate in this process. The second thing that I would say, Mr. Speaker, with respect to
fucking shit show.
that it is essential when we're dealing with national security to recognize two things. The party opposite is saying that they would support a partisan interference in the Public Health Agency of Canada, that if they were in government, they would see it as acceptable for political interference into that process. No, it's at an arm's length, and rightfully it is at an arm's length. They are the ones that identified these Canadian citizens, these eminent scientists, were lying, and they took action.
Some jail time for somebody.
Order. Colleagues.
This is going to get heated.
The Honourable Member for Saint Jean. The Court of Appeal has just handed down its ruling on the state secularism law, Bill 21, which has a broad consensus in Quebec. Quebecers want a clear separation of religion and state, and that's what this law guarantees. Now that the appeals court has handed down its ruling, it's clear that the next step is the Supreme Court. We saw it with Bill 101, and we'll see it again with Bill 21. What we're asking Ottawa is simple. Please, stay out of it, either directly or indirectly, because Quebec knows what's good for Quebec. Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Justice. I appreciate the question, and obviously the court has just rendered its decision. I will read it and we will reflect on it. But I'd like to say the message again that we've always given. We will always be here to defend the Charter of Human Rights, and if this ruling does get to the Supreme Court, we'll be there to intervene. The Honourable Member for Saint Jean. I repeat, Quebec knows what is good for Quebec. We know that French is not only our official language, but also our common language, and that it must be protected. We know that equality between men and women is non-negotiable. In Quebec, just like we know, the best way to protect religion is to have, there's a state to have none. And that's what Bill 21 is about. And that, too, is a broad consensus in Quebec. So will the Liberals, who say they don't like bickering, commit to not going against the will of Quebecers on Bill 21? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, I've always, our government has always underscored that we'll always be here to defend the Canadian Charter. This includes freedom of expression and freedom of religion and equality.
Yeah,
Nevertheless,
and that is not what that does.
If this ruling does make it to the Supreme Court of Canada, we'll be there to intervene.
Yeah.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
The Riot Canada drama never stops. Remember we told the Liberals that they get asked the coalition and Reds to do the work that was required? They said, no, it's not possible. Well, it turns out that the Riot Canada contract was awarded to a D&D employee. A public servant actually did the work. Under the Liberals, public money going to private consultants tripled. Why are the Liberals trying to give the Conservatives a run for their money at how much money they can waste on private consulting?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence. Actually, I want to thank the member for the further question because I think it's an important one. Mr. Speaker, as soon as we were made aware that the CEO of Delian was a D&D employee, we've taken immediate action to suspend all contracts with Delian, and I can confirm for this House that all active contracts with Dalian have been suspended. I can also confirm to this House that the member in question has also been suspended. The matter will be thoroughly investigated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, they're all going to jail.
Colleagues, once again, everyone asked, please be respectful of the questions that are asked, and of course of the answer given for many reasons. One of them, of course, is that members who require the use of translation can't hear through their earphones if members are shouting in terms of response.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Learn the fucking language, bitch.
A 6-person family and a pregnant woman live under a highway in Montreal. They were kicked out of their apartment. They cannot find affordable housing. This is the result of the Liberals and the Conservatives who have lost more than a million units of affordable housing. Will the Liberals, or are they ashamed of their track record, or are they too disconnected from reality? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know that every person in Canada has a right to a home. It is a fundamental right.
Oh, really?
We doubled funding for
work?
communities to fight against homelessness and to make sure everyone has a roof over their heads. Mr. Speaker, we know there's a lot of work to be done, but unlike the Conservatives, it's not through bickering with municipalities that we'll get there. We need to sit down with everyone and find a lasting solution to homelessness in Canada. Thank you.
The honourable member from Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
This Prime Minister isn't worth the cost, the crime, the corruption, or the cover-ups. After hiding the Winnipeg lab documents from Canadians for over 3 years, we finally know why the Liberals blocked Parliament. We know that Dr. Chu had close and clandestine relationships with entities of the People's Republic of China and collaborated with military scientists. The People's Liberation Army is a known security threat to Canada. So why did the Prime Minister cover up this breach of national security instead of arresting these spies?
Oh, man.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
I'll answer the first part of the question, as I suspect they're going to have other questions on the second element. On the first order, it was the first offer was to have all parliamentarians look at the documents through NSICOP. That was an immediate offer. Some opposition members said that wasn't a good answer because they wanted to make sure that if there was a need for redactions to be released, they wanted a process. So I, as House Leader at that point in time, suggested an ad hoc process that would ensure that an independent arbiter would make the decision about releasing those documents. I would remind the member again that it is an independent decision of the Public Health Agency to make redactions. I'm sure he's not suggesting that anything else other than that should happen.
The honourable member from Selkirk Interlake
That House
Eastman.
leader actually sued the Speaker. Dr. Chu maliciously shared technology and materials from the Winnipeg labs with Major General Chen, one of Beijing's top commanders at the Academy of Military Medical Science. The Academy is described in the CSIS documents as the highest medical research institution of the People's Liberation Army of the PRC and has offensive biological weapons capabilities. And one of its objectives is to transform the results of basic civilian research into military applications and biotechnologies. The Chinese military can now make more biological weapons and potentially use them against Canadians and our allies. Why did the Prime Minister cover up this national security threat?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
I already said that the documents first were released and then the additional redactions were actually commenced by us. The second point is when the member says maliciously, we don't know what their intention was. That's the purpose of an RCMP investigation. Second, these are individuals that I am deeply concerned about, like the member opposite. And in a process of due process, we understand what they did. With respect to the Chinese government, the military and the government and academia and scientists are all part of their military. That means that any connection that they had whatsoever wouldn't touch that. And so I think it's careful not
Colleagues, it's hard to hear the chair, to hear the response. If members are not satisfied with the response, sometimes the best opportunity is just to listen to it in silence and let it stand on its own. The honourable member from Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
The Health Minister should actually read the CSIS documents and actually describe all the breaches that were done and the espionage that was carried out. At the Prime Minister's top public health lab in Canada, Beijing military scientist Dr. Yan was given unfettered access to all the labs and the computer systems at the Winnipeg labs, which were covertly shared by Dr. Chu with Beijing. Instead of stopping this espionage, the Prime Minister decided to cover it up. Why did the Prime Minister put his admiration for the basic dictatorship of the Communist Party in Beijing ahead of the public safety of Canadians?
The Honorable Minister of Health. I think it's important to step back and really consider what the Conservative Party is saying here. At the time in which they were hired, these two Canadian citizens were eminent scientists who were well published and well regarded throughout North America. The fact that they lied and misrepresented themselves, Mr. Speaker, is reprehensible.
Colleagues, I'm going to ask members, please. I'll ask members from Mirror She Grand Lakes, please, to keep his comments to himself until when he will have the floor at the time that he asks a question. The Honourable Minister of Health has 15 seconds left on the clock.
So I would hope what they're not suggesting is that if they were in power, that they would have interfered politically, been able through clairvoyance to know that these eminent scientists, who at this point in time had no reason to believe that they were anything other than Canadian scientists who were doing good research, that they would have interfered politically with clairvoyance and got rid of them before
Canada's okay with spies, I guess.
The Honourable Member from Charlebourg.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we learned there were documents with respect to the Winnipeg lab, and the worst is confirmed. There was a leak from the Chinese Communist Party. And the first person represents a serious and credible threat to Canada's economy, was able to access this level 4 laboratory. Why did he not protect Canadians, the Prime Minister, the Honourable Minister of Health? China, Russia, or any other country?
China.
Well, this is an attack against our democracy, the House of Commons, and every member here. And it concerns me greatly. And this is the reason why we have measures now to ensure that we protect our public safety with policies that are as strong as possible to make sure our objective is not compromised. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg or Saint Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Minister said that the Prime Minister said he admired the basic dictatorship of China. And this lab in Winnipeg was working on some of the most dangerous viruses in the world. And there were dangerous pathogens that were passed on to the Chinese party. Does he realize that our national safety was in peril? The Honourable Minister, what Canadians...
the little chihuahua, man. Drop some L's in the chat for this
today. Well, we're talking about national security. It's not a partisan issue. And if there's something we won't take lessons on for the Conservative Party is protecting national security on research and science in Canada. We are the government that did the most to protect science in this country, to protect IP, to help our universities and research centers to identify risks. Mr. Speaker, last January, we published a list that indicates our research institutes that not do business. Member for Charlebourg, Saint Charles. Mr. Speaker, does the minister know that on March 31st, the Ebola virus was sent to Beijing through Canada?
What?
We sent a weapon to a country that is building up its stock of biological weapons. What? Does the Prime Minister realize that his government failed because the Chinese government is developing biological weapons and he's putting our security at risk? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, rather than talking about facts, what we hear from the opposition today is politicizing national security. And I think that all colleagues that were elected to this chamber, their first responsibility is the security and health of Canadians.
Yeah.
As I said last January, we did publish a list for entities that are protected to protect national security and IP. Will always be here to national security in Canada. The honourable member.
This is happening.
The Court of Appeal is clear. Bill 21 is constitutional and does not pose a problem. The fact that we've recognized the right of Quebecers to create their own rules means we've turned the page. But there are a few people who continue to contest it. What will the Liberal government choose to do? Respect the will of Quebecers with this appeals court decision, or continue bickering with Quebec? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to underscore that our government is clearly committed to defending the rights of liberties protected under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, particularly in terms of the right of freedom of expression and the right to equality. Our government has clearly expressed concerns with respect to the preventive use of the notwithstanding clause. If it does, this decision does get to the Supreme Court, we'll be there to intervene. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Yes, we're talking about respect for charter and court decisions as well, because despite what the Liberals say, Bill 21 has nothing to be criticized for. It is legitimate. It is a pillar for living together in harmony, which Quebecers want. And Liberals' fears are unfounded. Now that the appeals court has rendered its ruling, will the government commit to not contesting this Bill 21 either directly or indirectly? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, like the Prime Minister has already said, as I've already said, our government is committed to defending the rights and liberties of Canadians protected under the Charter. Nevertheless, we have to protect freedom of religion and expression. We've also said that our government has clearly expressed concerns with respect to the preventive use of the notwithstanding clause. If this case does go before the Supreme Court, our government will intervene. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. It's worrisome. The Liberals want secularism without any trace. They don't want us to say anything. They want to make it insignificant, but separating religion and state does mean something. It means that we respect the beliefs and the non-beliefs of each other, and they never get involved in a relationship with the state. Bill 21 has true implications, and the appeals court has recognized this, and the use of the notwithstanding clause is not only constitutional, but legitimate for Bill 21. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned by the Prime Minister and myself, we are clearly committed to defend the rights and freedoms in the Canadian Charter. Notably, the right to freedom of religion, expression, and right to equality. On several occasions, we've also said that we have serious concerns with the prevented use of the notwithstanding clause. If this case does get heard by the Supreme Court, our government will be here.
The Honourable Member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister isn't worth the cost or the cover-up. For 3 years, this Prime Minister covered up a terrifying national security breach at Canada's highest security lab, hiding the fact that the head of special pathogens was actively collaborating with top Beijing military scientists engaged in biodefense and bioterrorism. So, in the face of that, will the Prime Minister accept responsibility for this colossal failure on his watch?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've answered that question on numerous occasions, but let me address the preposition at the start of that question, where he says the working together with another political party. He doesn't want to do that, and I get that. He's used to making partisan points and not reaching across the aisle and collaborating. But you know what happens when you collaborate, Mr. Speaker, when you work together? You get national pharmacare. You get the ability to say to those that have diabetes that you've got your back and you've got medication. You say to women, we're going to give you real freedom. Freedom over your sexuality, freedom over your reproductive rights. That's what happens when you stop focusing on partisan politics and you start focusing on results.
The honorable member from Edmonton, St. Albert, Edmonton.
Disgraceful answer from this minister. The national security culture begins at the top with the prime minister. This is a prime minister who said that he admires Beijing's basic dictatorship. This is a prime minister who, over the past 8 years, has repeatedly ignored Beijing's interference. So, in the face of that, is it any wonder that under this prime minister's watch, top Beijing military scientists have unfettered access to some of Canada's most sensitive biological secrets?
Speaker, in the first order, that isn't true. What is true is that the Public Health Agency of Canada, which is one of the most respected agencies in the world, that was there for us throughout the pandemic, responsible for its operations. And the truth is, there were two individuals hired. They were Canadian citizens, eminent scientists, well known and well respected across Canada, and indeed around the world, who lied to the Public Health Agency of Canada. The Public Health Agency of Canada then took the very responsible action of firing those individuals, turning the matter over to the RCMP, where they currently are under investigation, Mr. Speaker.
The honorable member from St. Albert, Edmonton, had the opportunity to ask two questions. I'm certain he could speak to his House leader to ask more questions in the House. But until that time, please, I'd ask him to wait his turn until he has the microphone, until he has the floor. The honorable member from Lennox, Addington.
Speaker, evidence speaks otherwise. After 8 years, it's not the cost nor the cover-up. He can't be trusted to keep our people safe. Yesterday, the entire nation was shocked to learn that this government granted two People's Liberation Army assets full access to secret research in a top-secret Canadian lab. This represents the biggest security breach since the Cold War. And this happened under Prime Minister who famously said he admires China's basic dictatorship. Mr. Speaker, how can Canadians trust the Prime Minister that fails to take national security seriously?
The honorable Minister of Health.
The representations made by the member are inaccurate, and I would invite people to read the documents, which have been fully redacted.
ChatGPT answers.
Mr. Speaker, between a party that is focused on partisanship and difference. And you know what the member obviously talks about working with another party and what that might accomplish. What about dental care, Mr. Speaker? When we focused on cooperation, we were able to get dental care done.
We can jump into dumpsters to get our food, and then when we chip our teeth, we can get
3 million seniors who have access to dental care. They're voting against that. They're against that. Are they against pharmacare? Are they against the other fruits of cooperation that come from?
We can't eat, but we'll have nice teeth.
Calgary. Sorry.
Calgary. Come on, Mr. Speaker. You got one job, bro.
Colleagues. Again, colleagues, it is very important for us, for those of us who have the ability to speak both languages, it's a clear advantage of being in the House that we don't require the sets. But for those of us who do require it, it's very difficult to hear the questions or the answers if there's too much noise in the House.
Bro, there ain't no answers.
Learn the language, bitches.
Each of your respective
comments that have just been directed towards me seem highly inaccurate.
And to the questions.
Okay, robot.
Those of us who require the use of earphones can do so. The honorable member from Nanaimo.
I don't know. He's a weird dude.
Mr. Speaker, the number of people unable to find an Nanaimo ladysmith is staggering. And what have the Liberals done? Cut the Reaching Home funding to Nanaimo by 60%. And the Conservatives plan to cut funding and leave it up to rich developers who just so happen to be their biggest donors. Nanaimo needs more support, not less. The mayor of Nanaimo is calling for federal support. Will the minister provide the funding required for truly affordable housing in Nanaimo?
That sounds fun to say. Nanaimo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to take up the specific matter with the member who just raised it after question period to know more. But what I will say is that this federal government is absolutely committed to ensuring there's greater supply. Supply is always what underpins the housing crisis in this country and every other country that's experiencing exactly that. We need to see more building, and that's why we've incented the private sector by lifting GST on the building of apartment rentals. We've moved forward to work with municipalities to see zoning changes where so much of this is dealt with in terms of affordability. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Good try.
The honourable member for
Touchline.
Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, New Democrats are delivering diabetes medicine and devices and contraceptives for all Canadians today. Contraceptives are life-changing for women across this country. But shamefully, Danielle Smith said she doesn't want that for Albertans.
Right.
My constituents are outraged. And the conservative leader, when he was asked by the media, ran away. So we didn't have to talk about fairness for women. Will this government ensure that they sign agreements with all provinces so all women, all Canadians have access to being...
Thank you. That's hysterical. Trudeau didn't want to talk about women's reproductive, so he ran away.
It's a question of social justice. It's a question of saving lives. It's a question of prevention. It's a question of reducing costs enormously across this country. And I can say specifically with Alberta that I've had very constructive conversations with Adriana Lagrange, who's been willing to work and find compromise, find that common ground. Unfortunately, across the aisle, that's not what we see. Today, the leader of the official opposition, the Conservatives, ran away when asked if he would support diabetes medication, refused to answer whether or not he would slash contraceptives for women. They are already against dental. I'd really like to know where they stand for pharmacare.
NDP's the one that
The honourable
pushed the pharmacare.
The honourable member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, journalists and newsrooms are one of the pillars of our democracy in Canada. And in rural communities like ours, they play a role that's even more fundamental. In December, the Minister of Heritage reached an historic agreement with Google to provide $100 million of funding to newsrooms. Can she give this House an update on how and when newsrooms, but especially local media, will have access to this funding? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ow, motherfucker!
And despite months of opposition from the Conservatives last year, we adopted the Online News Act, which allowed us to reach an historic agreement with Google. That's $100 million in funding that Google's going to invest in local media that would never have been available had the Conservatives been in power. And yesterday, Google launched its open bid office to ask for eligible newsrooms to apply. Canadians can be sure that on this side of the House, we are always going to stand up to ensure that technological giants pay their fair share to protect Canadian citizens. Thank you. I would just like to ask the member for Palneuf-Jacques-Cartier to respect people taking the floor. The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Because it's not Conservatives making a link between these scientists and threats to national security. It's the government's own security agencies themselves saying that these individuals, quote, were collaborating with foreign entities that present a threat to the security of Canada. We're talking about research with pathogens and deadly viruses, while at the same time these individuals were on the payroll of the People's Liberation Army, the communist regime in Beijing. Now, rather than inform Canadians and come clean at the outset, the government went into overdrive to cover it up. How could the Prime Minister be so callous and selfish that he would try to protect himself rather than the security of Canadians?
Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. The shots of the chat range this year. He put his glasses on, his superpower.
I'm very happy to answer to my colleague because Canada showed leadership when it comes to national security, Mr. Speaker. That's something the Conservative will not want to ally to Canadians. But let me to be selective when it comes to the facts. On the 16th of January, Mr. Speaker, we announced that we will ban funding for research in sensitive areas. There's 100 entities around the world, Mr. Speaker. We work with our Five Eyes allies. We work with research centers in this country. We work with university, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know that we will always put national security first and defend the interests of Canada.
They'll put other national security first, not
They want to give
Canada's.
themselves a gold star that finally 3 years later, after fighting, kicking and screaming to keep these documents hidden, that now they've been released only because conservatives demanded it. Let's remember the facts. They ignored and refused to comply with 4 parliamentary orders. They took the unprecedented step of taking the Speaker of the House of Commons to court to keep these documents hidden, and then they called a snap election hoping it would all go away. If this was all just an administrative issue, then why the cover-up?
The Honorable Minister of Health. In the first order, one of the things that is disturbing about what the member is supposing is that if he was in government, and I hope that that doesn't happen, that they would interfere in the redaction process and they would be involved in it. We obviously did not do that, particularly not with national security. What we did do, and in fact, the member opposite and I had a conversation about this. First, I suggested immediately that they see the documents at NSICOM. Said that wasn't good enough. So I created an ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee gave them the opportunity not only to see the documents, but put to an independent arbiter whether or not they should be released publicly. We did that together. The documents are released. They're now before us.
The honourable member for Mégantic-Les-Rable. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is recognized for his admiration for China's basic dictatorship. After 8 years, he let the Chinese Communist Party interfere in our elections. He turned a blind eye to the interference with the Chinese diaspora. And with this Winnipeg lab matter, we see that there are people who represent a credible and serious danger to compromise Canada's national security. Will the Prime Minister finally admit that he tried to cover up these documents to protect himself instead of protecting Canadians? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, people listening at home must be saying, well, where were the Conservatives on January 16th? They must wonder, because on January 16th, Mr. Speaker, we announced as a government that we were going to ban funding. May I urge members, please, who have not been recognized, to wait their turn, and that way we'll be able to have a proper discussion.
Congratulations to my great-granddaughter
Instead of shouting across the aisle. The Honourable Minister, please continue. 22 seconds remaining. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the Conservatives will listen this time, because on January 16th, Mr. Speaker, we banned research in sensitive areas to work with 100 different companies. We are working with our allies to protect science, to protect intellectual property, and to protect the work that is done by our universities, Mr. Speaker. We are always there to defend Canada's interests. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-Les-Rable. Where was the minister, Mr. Speaker, in July 2019 when 2 scientists were expelled from Canada, Mr. Speaker, by CSIS? That was in 2019. That was more than 4 years ago, Mr. Speaker. What we learned yesterday is that the Prime Minister ignored newspapers. He took the Speaker to court, which has never been seen before, for the worst cover-up in history. Why did the Prime Minister choose to himself instead of Canada's national security? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, people listening at home must be shocked. We have just told Conservatives, once again, that not only the Prime Minister, but all members of the government on this side of the House, we take national security seriously. On January 16th, we did not ban one research entity, but 100. So we are protecting universities and colleges from this type of thing. So that's the type of measure we're putting in place to protect Canada's interests. We always stand up for science. The Honourable Member from Montcalm.
No! Fuck! God damn it!
To healthcare, Quebecers want care, not threats. A year after having forced Quebec to accept an increase in health transfers that covers only 1/6 The federal government is now threatening Quebec that it will steal $900 million if we don't submit our conditions by March 31st. The Liberals are once again playing political games at the expense of Quebecers with our own money. When will the Liberals finally stop taking ill people, pay Quebec the argent or the money that it's entitled to? The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, that the Bloc Québécois just likes to squabble. But when I spoke with Minister Lebel, it is clear that her objective is to cooperate and to find solutions. In our healthcare system, I think that Canadians and Quebecers want politicians, members, to find solutions, not to pick fights. And that is why I am very sure that we are going to find an agreement with Quebec. The Honourable Member from Moncton. Mr. Speaker, pharmacare is not coming anytime soon. Bill C-64 refers to principles to consider when working towards the implementation of national universal pharmacare. Otherwise, in fact, that actually sounds like a collection promise to me. The NDP is sold out very cheaply. But if one day, after having discussed these principles to consider when working towards the implementation of pharmacare, if Ottawa comes up with a pharmacare plan that Quebec has already, will Quebec be able to withdraw with full compensation, no strings attached?
What are you doing?
The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, this year, for the first time in the history of the country, everyone with diabetes, everyone who needs contraceptives will be able to have access to them. That is such an historical announcement that it will change the lives of so many Canadians, even if Quebec already has such a program. Yesterday, I had a good conversation with Minister Dubé on this topic, and I think that we will reach an agreement with Quebec very soon. Hold the Norfolk.
Common sense, the taxes, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. After 8 years, this liberal NDP prime minister is not worth the conflict, the crime, or the corruption. Never before in the history of this great nation have so many people had to resort to food banks. Thousands are now resorting to dumpster diving because they can no longer afford the cost of food. Will this prime minister show some compassion and cancel the April 1st carbon tax hike?
That's right, take it here.
The Honourable Parliamentary
Our colleague is from Ontario, where I'm from, Mr. Speaker, and
canceling the fucking oil hike.
Ontarians will receive is over $1,100. That's for a family of 4. Mr. Speaker, I'm not surprised though to hear that member and the Conservatives continue to bring up these
Joke's
points.
on you.
They want to
Thanks
take
a lot, fucking global warming. I just don't fill my oil tank this year. That's a next year problem.
The leader of the opposition ran away when asked if he would support pharmacare.
If this is global warming, I'm all down for it. Like, fucking keep producing, like, let fucking the Amazon guy go to fucking not space in his cock rocket all he wants. Order your daily Amazon packages. Bye. Go ahead. I'll keep digging out of your trash.
30% rise in the demand for food charity in some regions. I live in Southern Ontario. We produce food to feed the entire nation. Yet so many families there still do not have enough income to cover basic food expenses. Why won't this government just do the right thing? Cancel the 23% carbon tax hike on April 1st so that Canadian families can afford food again.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
That new member who wants to take Canada out of the UN needs to know a little bit of good news for a change, Mr. Speaker. We've had many months of good news for Canadians. Just recently, Statistics Canada announced that in January we gained 37,000 new jobs, and there are 1 million more Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Before the pandemic, the unemployment rate is at 5.7%, and wage growth is outpacing inflation, and that's even more true for women. You'd think that member would care about such things.
The honorable member from Westminster.
Mr. Speaker, common sense conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Because after 8 years, Canadians know that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. Life has never been more expensive in this country. 1 million Canadians food banks this year alone. And still, this Prime Minister is hell-bent on hiking the carbon tax up by 23% on April 1st. Mr. Speaker, why won't the Prime Minister get his carbon tax increase and help make life more affordable for Canadians?
The honorable government house.
I think the Canadians have had enough of the gloom and doom coming from over here. They're deliberately ignoring the Canadians.
What a projection, right? Just no self-awareness, no. It's embarrassing.
Keith. Let's say Keith. I hate him.
Who? Milan? Downstairs, Liz?
The honorable government house leader.
Mr. Speaker, 2.3 million Canadians have been lifted out of poverty since this government took office and started caring about Canadians and putting supports in place. Those guys time cutting. Families throughout Canada have seen their care fees slashed, in many cases down to $10 a day, thanks to this government and this bill C-35 that we're getting ready to pass today.
The honorable member from Vancouver Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Black Mental Health Week begins next week. It's a time to amplify Black voices and support equity in mental health. It is time to correct the disproportionate lack of Black health researchers so we can deliver culturally appropriate mental health solutions. It is the wide gap in health for many Black people. It's a result of historical racism. Can the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions tell us what her thought would do access to culturally safe and informed mental health Black communities?
I actually want to listen to her, like.
Mr. Speaker, and remember, she is such a tremendous advocate on so many issues that matter to Canadians. Black communities across Canada continue to experience social and economic inequities which have persisted.
What the fuck is wrong with your name?
And have negative impacts on mental
Yara.
health. We know there's more and more work to doing the work together. Through programs like the Mental Health of Black Canadians Fund, we are supporting organizations to develop focused, knowledge-based programs with capacity to improve the mental health of Black Canadians and meet their needs. We'll keep working. Canada, Mr.
The honorable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Common sense conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop crime. Meanwhile,
Everybody says that.
NDP Liberal Prime Minister, Canadians know he's not worth the cost of crime or the corruption. And just yesterday, we learned that in the Prime Minister's $60 million Arrive scam, one of the contractors who was paid millions is actually a bureaucrat for this NDP Liberal government. That's why common sense conservatives passed a motion in this House demanding that this government produce all of the documents on this Prime Minister scandal, release and commit to releasing every last page.
The honorable Minister of National Defense. Mr. Speaker, 24 hours. 24 hours after we became aware that the CEO of Dalian was a D&D employee, we've taken action, Mr. Speaker. We have suspended. That took 23 hours too long. We have suspended the employee, and we have launched an investigation on how this person became an employee of D&D in the first place. Mr. Speaker, we will act to ensure that we protect the integrity of our institutions.
What the fuck is a D&D? Huh? If you're saying a D&D.
For Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Like Dungeons and Dragons?
Mr. Speaker, let's offer it a little louder for those in the back. What we're looking for is a commitment from this government to release every page of those documents, because after 8 years, it's clear to see that these Liberals aren't worth the corruption with their NDP Liberal Prime Minister. It's very clear, a $60 million scandal with people in their basements getting paid $20 million, not doing any IT work. And now we have that minister's staff who are getting paid millions of dollars while Canadians are lined up at food banks. So, and I'll say it loud so the minister can hear it. Will they commit, stand in their place to getting Canadians' money back for their corruption?
But they're unfortunately gonna have to put the IT guys, the IT company that Trudeau hired, they're gonna have to put them on the spot. They're ruining their lives.
And since that time,
Because they're not gonna rat on Trudeau.
We suspended the member, and we've launched a thorough investigation.
And you can't fucking rat on the Prime Minister, but like, what? Dollar store.
Investigation after investigation.
Dollar store. Not
Not
granulated.
Just to remind that I expect all colleagues to have respect for each other and to wait their turn to speak.
Fucking creepy. You're like a fucking like
and at that
serial
point,
killer.
when they
Like,
have the opportunity to speak, I will also request that all people listen to that member. The Honourable Minister has 15 seconds left on the clock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
like a fucking creepy
What I've already
priest.
said, except to remind the members of this House that when this information came to our attention, we took immediate action. We took the steps necessary to protect Canadians' interests and to
Could you
remove
maybe
this
give me a
individual
Band-Aid?
from our employ.
The Honourable Member from Brantford Grant.
Mr. Speaker, common sense conservatives will axe the tax. We will build the homes. We will fix the budget. We will stop the crime. Well, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Crime or corruption. Yesterday, we learned that yet another company received $8 million tax dollars for the Arrive scam. But it gets better. This one, owned by a national defense bureaucrat. The rot continues. Parliament passed our motion to force the government to release all documents and to repay taxpayers. Will the government
I
and
ask
release
it
the documents?
or in the medicine cabinet in the middle, on the right. I got fucking hot sauce on my
began
cut.
his question by telling you about all the things that the Conservatives propose to do at some disappointed future.
Yes, Jack.
Bacon, I smell pork. Watch out, Bill. I got a fork.
When they cut the resources of the police, our national security intelligence advisors, all of the people whose job it is to protect us and to maintain the integrity of our institutions, they cut them. And Mr. Speaker, we've been rebuilding the government to get the work done, and we are prepared to take the action necessary.
Enough hot sauce in it.
I see it in the comments. I don't know who wrote that, but that was funny as hell.
We just turned to ask the question. The Honourable Member.
The Honourable Member Fred Pepina. Mr. Speck, in Quebec, we're fortunate enough to have tourist attractions that charm people here, elsewhere in Canada and abroad. The tourism contribution represents more than 3% of employment and 2% of the GDP, whether it be for sustainable tourism, agritourism, outdoor experiences, indigenous tourism, or rural tourism. Can the minister tell us how our government is going to maximize the growth potential of this sector? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Tourism.
Huh? Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. And he can tell everyone in his writing and every
I'm putting my face on first because I fucked up you all morning.
The tourism growth fund is ready to receive applications from all kinds of companies and associations in order to choose projects and make tourists' experience better. Conservatives don't believe in tourism. They want to cut everywhere in Saguenay and Gaspésie, but on this side of the house, we stand up for tourism in Canada. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Mr. Speaker, last summer's wildfires devastated communities across the country. Preparedness has admitted that the upcoming wildfire season will be even worse.
Canadians want the government to take decisive action.
Stop.
And according to last week's
I
Abacus
just like
poll,
CPAC is just like so long. What's on the floor?
Your face.
What is that?
It's
It's what sauce?
the sauce you put in your the black sauce. It's hoisin sauce.
Oh. You just said the soy sauce.
It's not soy sauce.
Oh. Okay.
It's very gummy and sticky. It's this one.
Ugh, gross.
Le problème ne se réglera pas seul. Alors moi, je recommande Sensodyne.
Shut up! That was literally a fucking super bad voiceover. Like,
Jack, do you want me to beat you up?
Jerry Wise, and I want to talk about what do you do when your real self triggers your family or others. I'd like to talk about that today and give you some points in maintaining
that for me
your
since you did the
true
right way and I
self or
don't.
your real self, even if it triggers other people, because it will. A real self, a solid self, a
Spider.
differentiated self.
And it was
will
me and
change
Victoria. We were both like,
trigger other
what?
people.
I literally just told my boyfriend the other day that he was doing it wrong.
Along within the emotional Wi-Fi in the relationship. And they're not ready for you to change or you to assert yourself or you to have boundaries or you to share how you really feel about something. Most of our families and others are not, especially if we grow up in a dysfunctional family. So firstly, when that happens, we are our real self, asserting ourselves, setting
If Ezra ever
boundaries,
sees me again, she better fucking run
stating
for her
what
fucking
we
life.
believe to be true
Ezra.
in a non-threatening way and a
Oh,
non-judgmental way.
go tell Paulo to tow her
Stating
car.
ourselves, and they are triggered, then we want to stay as calm as possible. That's the first thing you want to do. I've got a video called Calmness is Everything. Go check that out. I think you'll find it helpful.
Calmness is
Because
everything.
calmness really is everything when it comes to relationships. Just because of how we function.
I do that all the
Our
time.
emotional process and our biological processes.
Where I just
That
like say it
calmness
and like
is
2 seconds later
very,
they say the exact same way.
Secondly,
Okay,
don't
fat ass.
absorb or share their emotional
Yeah, the
process.
chair went flying. Like,
Don't mirror it back to them. If they're triggered, you don't have to be. But we are so used to if someone's triggered, then we become triggered, then they become more triggered, then we become more triggered.
Yeah.
We want to stop that triggering. We want to circuit break that triggering. And so don't absorb when someone else is triggered. Continue to be in your emotional state as you shared your real self.
That's exactly where we stopped the triggering thing. It's like, no.
well, like, and it's because, like, and me and Vic even talked about it, like, where she was like, at one point, we were trying to, like, be like, okay, Fury, like, yeah, the voices, like, what are they, like, going along with it, almost, like, as if it's, like, they're real. I'm like, yeah, but, like, that's not, he's not crazy. He's just drug crazy, like, and if you're saying, like, okay, yeah, the voices, like, you're just letting him keep perpetuating this like fucking fantasy that he now can't seem to break out of. Like, Jack. What? What are you looking at me for?
Begging for me for something you have right there. See? Money. Wow.
What?
See? You're being ungrateful, you little cunt. Fucking bullying me.
Yeah, he is a fucking bully.
Protected, but you believe my dad?
Not
No,
the
defending
emotional
myself.
state that they're triggering is making you become. Because it's really that they can't make me become, make me be triggered, actually. Nobody can make you be triggered.
Can you not say that? It's like
something
I'm
that we
still
choose
triggered.
to do. And it's very
Those are my
automatic
trigger
many
words.
times, unconscious. So I know why people say, oh, well, Jerry, people can make you feel triggered. And yeah, but we have more control over that than you realize. And in some of my other videos, I talk about why and how. Thirdly, stay matter of fact. Stay neutral. And just be yourself. Make it no big deal. This just simply is about the new me. That's all it is. I really try to downplay it. They're going to hype it up. If you say, I'm not sure the Baptist church is really totally all for me, then you just opened up a chasm in the earth. And now we have a major triggering on their part.
Big old alcoholic.
You want to
drug so
this
hard.
is not a big deal.
Causing
for me.
mischief.
I understand it could be new for
Sleeping
you
around
guys,
with everybody.
but it's not a big deal for the Baptist church not to be where I want to go to church.
Tried so hard.
And it could be Baptist, Catholic, Presbyterian, Methodist. It could be Muslim, Jewish. It can be any kind. I'm just putting Baptist church out there as an example. But again, make it matter of fact. I'm not telling all of you not to go to the Baptist church. It's no big deal. It's just not for me. It's no big deal. This is just what I've come to see. And be matter of fact and neutral. And continue with that even if they are triggered. Fourthly, empathize if necessary without giving ground. And that's what I teach in the online program that I have out there, which I would recommend you sign up for. It's listed down in the description. The online program, Your New Road to Self. And we learn how to empathize without giving ground. Because, if they're triggered by, well, I never knew you didn't like the Baptist church. Well, you're right. I don't know that I ever expressed that to you guys. So I can understand why that might be a surprise. But it's no big deal. That's just kind of where I'm at. Again, I empathize and understand they may have never heard this from me before. Let me empathize with them. But then I'm going to stand my ground. Just because it's new doesn't mean I want to change back and go, oh, no, you're right. The Baptist church is the only way to go. It's the only possible way. No, I'm not going to give my ground. I can empathize without giving ground. If someone calls me a totally ridiculous, stupid idiot, or as I mentioned in my videos, a Coca-Cola, which is just kind of crazy talk that doesn't make any sense. That's like calling me a totally stupid idiot. I know I'm not a totally stupid idiot. Have I ever been stupid? Yes. Have I ever acted like an idiot? Yes. But I'm not a totally stupid idiot. And so it's okay for me.
Like
I can even
big old
empathize
fucking
with that.
alcoholic.
Oh, well, I can understand.
Whatever.
There's times that,
Sure, I'm an alcoholic. I genuinely try to be an alcoholic. It's very hard.
But
very expensive
I
habit.
would not agree with you about the assessment about me.
It's fucking stick before you
I
get drunk.
feel differently.
It hurts. You bail all the time.
So I can
Yeah, and
be
throwing up is
empathetic,
fucking
even
terrible.
something
Like,
crazy, and then share where I'm at or how I'm different. And I think it's very important that we share that differentness. Fifth, stay out of your feelings at the moment. In other words, if you're sharing something and being your real self, other people are triggered, try to stay out of your feelings. Stay in your thoughts. It's not easy. I understand that's what we've done so often for so long, but try to pull that way and stay out of the feelings. The feelings are probably not going to help, and more likely they may tend to be more reactive. So I want to stay in my head more in this instance. That doesn't mean I'm demeaning or telling you feelings are unimportant. No, they are important, but they may not be important for this instance.
You know, it is the only chair.
So feelings are not always important for a certain instance. And I think this happens when others are being reactive around it. Sixthly,
Great chairs that they got it.
and expect. Again, if you're going to be with family or with others, predict what you can expect with their responses so you can resist giving your internal power away. Leave their reactions in their hands, not in yours. Well, Jerry, I think you just need to go and talk to the pastor about this at the Baptist church so that you can get straight on what's the right church. Well, I'm not sure that's necessary for me. I understand that in your way of thinking, it would be best if I went to the Baptist church.
Stop sniffing the fucking
But
ground.
we, Mom and Dad, we are different. And this is one place where we are different. And again, I'm empathetic without giving ground. And I'm going to leave their reactions in their hands. I was empathetic. I understand how it can be difficult. We've all gone to the Baptist church all of our lives. And now I'm saying I would like a change. That could be upsetting. Okay, but that upsetness is for them to work through, not for you to caretake, not for you to overfunction with. It's for them to deal with or work through or grieve the loss or
Oh
whatever
shit,
they
so
need
sorry,
to
I
do.
texted you, see?
like you are not responsible for how they deal with being triggered. All you can be is yourself. They'll have to do whatever they're going to do with their trigger.
It's my sticker I put out.
I'm not going to be the therapist. I'm not going to be what they ought to do. I'm going to state what I believe, empathize, stand my ground, and be myself. That's the most that I can be, and it's actually the best gift you can give somebody. Fixing them regarding their triggering is not the best gift to give somebody that you love. It really isn't. Being clear is one of the best gifts to give to people you care about. Being clear and being a solid self is the best gift you can give in relationships. 8, a pseudo self is directed by others. A real self is directed by you. So if you want to know when am I being a real self and when I'm being a pseudo self is directed or feeling pressured from others. A real self is not vulnerable to that.
I guess I only have a real
A real self is
Me too. That's
simply
exactly it.
you
Like
are.
I'm not capable
There's
of
some training I've listed below that might be of
changing
help to
who
you.
I
It's
am
about
to appease
84
other
minutes.
people.
It's free.
But I'm
You
really
sign
good
up
at
and you can
working
go there and
around
listen to it.
people's
I think that might be helpful for those who want
comfort
to
level.
manage their real self even
But
more.
we're not doing that
and how
anymore
others react to
because
them.
people's standards of
I want to thank
comfort
you for watching today.
are not for me to
Have a
adjust
great
to.
day.
Like,
and be wise.
like you have to work that out on your own time. Like,
I only use Word2.
Keep your work plagiarism free. Word2. Try it for free.
like Dan being upset that you're not being like texting back enough or like not being like as into the friendship as he is. It's kind of like it took 6 years for people to finally accept that you cannot contact me 24/7 because I literally was like, I'm not having a phone anymore because I don't want it. Because the only time people call me is with emergencies and people dying or someone's already dead or like they want something from me. And I don't want to constantly be mad at my friends anymore or my family because that's the only time they call me. So I'm just gonna eliminate the whole phone problem altogether. Because people kept getting that. Like I literally had people who were like, you didn't call me back. And like we're not friends anymore now because I didn't call you back in the timely fashion that you expect. Well, if that's like your standard of friendship, that's like yeah, but like my life doesn't revolve around other people. Like, and I will get back to you when I'm at a time where it's convenient for me to get back to you. And I don't work at other people's convenience. Like,
Apologies are really about making amends.
it's not the speed of science.
So, seems so simple, right?
that true apology is all but impossible for a narcissistic person. The thing that they often do, though, is they turn the apology into a bit of a defense.
Hey, fat fuck, what are you doing under the table where I can't see you?
It might be things like, okay, I'm sorry I yelled at you. Are you happy now? I yell because I'm never heard or appreciated. If you could just show me that you care, then I wouldn't be so on edge. So weigh in. Is that an apology? Or is that really them defending themselves? Personally, I think it's a defense wrapped up in a gaslighted bow. That's the struggle, right? More often than not, narcissistic apologies basically feel like they're defending themselves.
It's an excuse.
It's like they're providing an evidence base for the thing that they're actually supposed to apologize for. Their mouths form the word.
I should have absolutely known what he was
when
like.
It ends up being an entry into.
Oh, fine. Like, you want to go to therapy? I'll go to therapy. I was like, what? So yeah, if I, you know what? Fine. If you think that therapy will help so much, I'll go. But I think it's gonna be a waste of time and money.
I've been feeling ignored for a while.
Like, okay. And he went to about 2 months of that, and then one day he just wanted to quit. And I'm pretty sure that day it's because the therapist was like, you know, you're a narcissist, right?
We were expanding.
And he was like, I don't know, I just like don't connect with her. I'm like, well, you don't always connect with the first therapist you get, you know, like. So it takes multiple therapists, like.
What did you expect?
Actually supposed to connect with the therapist here.
Does that feel like an apology to you? I didn't think so. Now, for a narcissist.
Actually, because like even like the therapist that I had that actually
impossible.
That BetterHelp app is actually the first time that I've ever gotten therapy that was actually helpful, but it's because they give you a survey first, and it's like whatever, like there's so many mental problems that you could possibly have, like that it's very like it's kind of ridiculous to assume that you're even going to get someone who understands what you're going through if you go to like appointments, like what, like an actual therapy office. Like, and also I like the fact that when something's happening, I could literally message her on the spot, and like when she's not busy, she'll see the message and she'll contact me back, and then I can just schedule an appointment for like later that day. Because like I don't really like if something happens, you don't want to talk to a therapist about it like 3 days later.
No.
Like it's kind of fucking stupid.
Or you don't want to connect with your therapist like fucking Sia does with her therapist, and then just talks in everybody's back and makes her feel better. It's like, okay, yeah, and she tells her she's right on everything.
Basically, yeah, it just like all the things that she's doing that are shitty. Yeah. Like, but like obviously your therapist wants to get. As much as I need a job, and I do want to have people like that patients that I serve, but like,
hey, what did you just eat?
Jack, what did you just eat? You're a pain in the butt. No, I thought it was very interesting that she was just kind of like 20 years of me, and then she was like, do you like actually want to resolve your issues? Like, because like the whole point of being a therapist is not like to have a forever patient. Like, it's not a forever paycheck. Like, you should eventually have like whatever you want therapy resolved, and like not really need your therapy anymore.
You know you're doing something wrong.
Thank you. Eat your food. Like, you still have a piece of treat on the floor eating.
Fuck you up, man.
I don't know what you're looking at me for. I don't know what you want me to do. We'll go back to my show.
To do so, to apologize, is a sort of psychological recognition that they are human and flawed and not, and that cracks through their grandiosity and evokes all kinds of shame. So they may do the sort of pseudo apology.
No, I knew
Oh,
that when
well,
I said, I was like,
well,
okay, well,
or
would
just
you
be able
be
to say that they
interested in
apologize.
doing couples
But
therapy? And he was like, why? So we could waste more money and fucking like. I was just like, yeah, there it is. Okay, so you just wanted to go to therapy to just make it be like, and to make it look like he's making an effort because everyone knew that he admitted to being abusive and he needed to go to either like anger management or like something to deal with his anger problem.
The word sorry tricks us into thinking we just heard an apology, but you didn't really. Dig deeper. Write out what they said if you need. And if you'll see that nearly every narcissistic apology you have ever received was really them defending themselves and never an accountability. Now this doesn't feel good. But people, we are human beings. We make mistakes in relationships.
Oh, no, I realize that when people come back to me and they go, you were right. I'm like, that does not make me feel better. That makes me feel significantly worse. Like, I knew I was right the whole time. And I really don't need people to come back to me later on and be like, yeah, you're right, I should listen to you.
You make amends. And you don't keep doing the thing that required the apology. Relationships not only move forward from that, they can actually grow. The entire enterprise of narcissistic apologies is really all about gaslighting, deflection, and their maintenance of their grandiose and perfect vision of themselves, while continuing to paint you out as the problem who's too sensitive, and then their behavior as being understandable. So when you do finally get that apology, that so-called apology, you often don't feel whole. Because ultimately, it wasn't an apology. And you'd be surprised, even therapists can get tricked by that. A couple of therapists will say, well, look, he just said sorry. If it had all that gaslighting schmutz underneath it, not so sure it was an apology. Don't let the word trick you. Pay attention to all the other festoonery around that I'm sorry. Make sure it's not just them defending their bad behavior.
Think to yourself, what are some things you should never say to a narcissist? That's what this whole series is going to take on. Every so often I'm going to be putting out these videos that really answers this question. What should you not say to a narcissist? So here's one for you. Have you ever asked a narcissist this question? Do you listen to yourself? Have you ever asked a narcissist that question? Sometimes by learning the things to not say, you can actually make the rather bumpy road of a relationship with a narcissist a little bit of a more survivable space. But let's go to this idea. Asking or saying to the narcissist, do you ever listen to yourself? Now, this is definitely not a good thing to say to a narcissist, but it's so tempting to say it, right? Now, do you ever listen to yourself? When you have to listen to the gaslighted, delusional, manipulative, victimized rants that come out of them, you just want to ask them, are you listening to yourself? As always, I am telling you to avoid saying all the various things I'm going to tell you in this series as they unfold because
Yay! Hello.
Hi.
You're going to be left facing
Go away
your
from me.
dysregulated rage. And let me tell you, even if you feel a momentary satisfaction,
Get ready to go away from your stare down.
Their rage is actually really, really uncomfortable, miserable experience to have to be able to face them. So why would you want to ask them this question? Mostly because what they're saying doesn't make sense. Listening to yourself. Many people who are experiencing narcissistic relationships will be so confused by what they are hearing that they will first doubt themselves and think, maybe I'm hearing this wrong.
Yeah, maybe I'm super misunderstanding something.
Than it is, or I'm confused, or maybe they're right. All of that, that's what the gaslighting does to us. It leaves us questioning our entire reality and ourselves. But the reason this is a bad question is it because it misses the damaging alchemy of two key patterns in narcissistic people. Their lack of ability to be self-reflective, to really think about themselves, and their lack of insight, and their emotional dysregulation and their impulsivity. People with narcissistic personality styles lack insight. it's central to this personality style. They are unable to think about how their behavior affects other people. And that is also in large part due to their lack of empathy. Because even if they did know, they don't care.
Yeah.
And there's also a lack of capacity to think deeply about feelings, motivations, or behavior in people who are narcissistic. There's a very infantile organization to the narcissistic personality. And so levels of thought, or we should say an adult, such as the implications of what they are saying or how the message could be received, it doesn't even enter their minds. But for a minute, let's give folks who have narcissistic personalities.
Actually, we did a speed together for a year, and that year was actually probably the only good year that we had. And then he stopped because he didn't want his company, because he worked for the city.
After all,
So he didn't want his company to ask me to do like a urine test for whatever reason. And it's also like if you work in construction and shit and you're doing like projects with heavy machinery, you don't want to be like under the influence of anything. Totally understand that. But then he told me that he only did it so that he could get me off of it. I was like, you started doing drugs because I told him, I was like, if you want to go out and get it yourself, that's like do whatever you want. But I was like, I'm not getting you drugs. Like I'm not gonna get drugs for you. Like I'm not gonna take your money to go get you drugs. So, like that's not why I'm not down for that. Like, but if you want to go and get your own drugs, like then you go get your own drugs. You can do them yourself. Like I don't care. I don't tell you what to do.
Is there a good time to start doing drugs?
No, and then like to be like, oh, I only started doing them like to get you off of them. Like, what makes you think that just because you stop doing them that I'm gonna stop doing them? Like,
and then since they are dysregulated, they turn around and they do it again. Narcissism is all about tension reduction. They do not like it when strong feelings come up in them, or when.
No, that's why it was actually very good that for that 1 year because he was able to talk about stuff.
And then there's what people say bizarre,
Okay.
terrifying, confusing, threatening, angering, and or hurtful.
That's my mistake, though.
So if you were to say to them,
what?
I texted her with my phone.
Oh.
When they hear that from you, it activates their shame. In fact, I can almost guarantee it will.
Yeah.
After one of their infantile breakdowns being shown to them, or it being pointed out to them, or being reminded of it. So if you call them out on their emotionally immature behavior and ask them, don't you see it? Are you not?
No, I repeat it back to them.
Then I'll tell you.
No, you don't know. Like that's what you sound like. Literally.
Like, you see the crack of lightning?
And they always do this pause. We're like, what? You turn off.
Experience their shame. Then just like the thunder.
But same with the puffer fish. Whenever men do the puffer fish at me, I poke them in the chest, and then they look at me blankly, and they, like what Keela did. But I was just like, hey, why are you yelling? What is your problem? He was like, what? I'm like, what is your, like, you came over here and just started yelling at Chief. Like, what is your problem? He was just like, stares at me. I'm like, do crazy eyes at me, like, fucking all up in my ass. I got no candy for you, Kilo. I was just like, confused. I was like, and he just like slowly started walking away. I'm like, yeah, bye. Like, fucking douche.
I got no candy for you.
The fact is, they don't care enough about you or your feelings or anyone else to stop themselves. That impulsivity is more important than anything else. This question to a narcissist, are you listening to yourself, is never going to get an honest or clear with a high conflict personality style. So ideally, don't ask it. Because here's the thought. Maybe the narcissistic folks are smarter than the rest of us. You know why? They know better. And they often don't listen to themselves. Maybe we should take a page out of that playbook and not listen to them either. This is a key thing to not ask people who are narcissistic this question. What's going to come back at you is not good for you. It's not going to move the needle. It's probably going to make things worse. You're just going to have to accept. They can't self-reflect. They're very impulsive. The combination of all that means they're not listening to themselves. And if they were, they're going to blame you for it.
Yeah.
In many ways, the narcissist.
You're sabotaging me.
They are able to deflect blame and responsibility.
Well, I'm sorry.
For so many things.
We sometimes see this in very public cases. A big corporate wonk or celebrity who's quite narcissistic does something bad, and until the 11th hour, they dodge, they duck, they deflect, they definitely don't take responsibility until they're really cornered with a smoking gun. And then they'll make some sorts of half-hearted efforts to take some responsibility, but then they'll often say that classical narcissistic defense. Instead of saying, I'm so sorry for what I've done. And
the first time I told him I was leaving.
They'll say,
he had a
I'm
panic
sorry
attack.
that they feel that way.
I think he probably faked having a panic attack because that's what he. Oh my god!
Whether it happens on an international level,
That's actually what he accused me of. He said that my panic attacks, I was faking it. Like, why would anybody fake this? It's so humiliating.
That a person is simply not doing the adult thing and taking responsibility for something that's happening in their lives. We all screw up. We all screw up. And the most noble thing we can do is step up and say, I did this, and I'm responsible for this. Take the hits on that and move forward. At a minimum, it's good karma.
Okay,
But
see
we
you
live
Saturday at
in
11.
a very litigious society where attorneys on a regular basis are instructing
My
their
God, I'm
clients,
important today. Jesus.
don't cop to this yet. Let me see what I can do. So when the
You're
system
important to me
set
every
up,
day.
Yeah!
responsibility for something that in fact you did do wrong or did do,
I love you.
to not take responsibility is incentivized. You can see how a narcissist will run with that. In fact, a lot of people will think that a person who does take responsibility is a bit of a sucker for doing that and taking a harder hit than they need to. When we don't take responsibility in a close relationship for something we did or said or didn't do or didn't say,
Bishop brought it up.
very hurtful to the other person or people in those relationships. Taking responsibility is all that another person needs. It goes farther than an apology. For a person to say, I did do that. I don't even have a good explanation for why I did, but I did. And if they throw in and I'm sorry and mean it, well then you're getting more than what most people would ever get with a narcissist. But that ability to take responsibility is very difficult because shame is such a key dynamic in narcissism. Shame is sort of a public emotion where the public disapproves, and what that means is if there's shame in the house, the narcissist.
That's what you keep saying. You should bring public shaming back.
Because if you're ashamed of something,
People are booing you for it. You're not gonna do it again.
like, but maybe you should feel ashamed. Maybe you should feel guilty. Maybe you should check why you feel that way, rather than everybody else catering to your fucking your guilty feeling. Like, maybe you should, I don't know, change something you're doing to make you feel that way.
Check some individual responsibility
for the things they do or don't do.
They
Pay
serve
attention to
refreshment.
that, because over a lifetime,
They serve
that
refreshment, yes.
on your soul. In a family system, when people don't take responsibility,
Dad,
roads a sense of trust.
They check his privilege, yes.
And people start really create a sense of we're just simply pulling away from the system because nobody is taking responsibility for what's happening. It's a terrible lesson for children to see, because probably one of the most noble things we can show a child is even if you do something wrong, step up, do the right thing, and take
My dad almost brought me back to the IGA with Apple.
In many situations, children often are
Like, we just spent $70 at IGA. I was like 23, 24, and he was like, I should bring you back. Like, to what? Return the core? Like,
not only can it help prevent them from engaging
pay for it?
in the future, but it
it's like
also
Madison
teaches
is stealing. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? As far as I'm concerned, $70 and we walk out with like 3 bags of shit, that's stealing. Like,
we're living in
$14 for garlic, that's fine.
and hoping they can deny them after the fact and
That's
get
more
away
than death. It's
rather than really doing humane
that's
things
like
to
you,
punish for them. That kind of culture not only plays up on global, national kinds of stages.
Because I know that garlic does not cost $14 to make
or a family.
and distribute.
But
Like,
where it really breaks our hearts when it happens one-on-one with people we allegedly love and who are supposed to love us. We just simply cannot take responsibility for what they've done or said. Again, pay attention to the pattern. When it happens, your best recourse is to reflect on what this means and what this person is about. That pattern of deflecting and not taking responsibility tends to be pretty chronic, and it's not particularly amenable to change. You can certainly try, and sometimes people can find some therapy to be able to say, yeah, I did do that. But sometimes after a lifetime or years of hearing
Yes.
that, they finally do start taking responsibility and maybe too little, too late. At the end of the day, if you spend enough time with any given narcissistic person, they will seem emotionally cold. One thing that happens to them is they get emotionally depleted really, really quickly. And so what might happen is, especially if you go through a period of love bombing with a narcissist, when they're really trying to win you over and showing you the best time of your life, and you're falling in love, the last thing in the world you think is this person is
I don't think I really
because they're often
consider what the big.
charming, charismatic. They don't
Quite the opposite, actually.
use someone who's
That's funny.
really distant. Sometimes even
It was more like, what's your line? Where's your line? Let's test this.
Start getting emotionally exhausted, which happens a couple of months into the relationship. There are times they seem so depleted that they really just don't care. They almost look right through you. And many times for people who spend time with narcissists, they'll say, it's as though they just don't care. To which I've
Because they don't.
to tell people clinically, yeah, they kind of don't. So that emotional coldness can almost feel like the sun permanently going back behind a bunch of clouds after the sunniest day you've ever been through. The warmest day in the world turns cold very quickly. When that happens, a lot of people in the relationship with narcissists feel really panicky. They try to take life back. I want to go back to the way it was. I want to go back to the way it was. But what's hard to understand is that the way it was actually just a short-term thing. And the way it is, the more remote, cold, unempathic, and distant place you're in right now is how it's going to be. And that's a hard adjustment because we tend to sort of fixate on the way something started, especially if it was good. The emotional coldness we see in many people who are narcissists is often a byproduct of the lack of empathy, as well as the sense of deep insecurity they hold, and that they're not being in contact with their emotional worlds. By staying very superficial, staying on the grandiose, sort of top level, they don't do the big emotional deep dives that often results in the emotional richness and connection that makes a relationship emotionally warm.
Yeah, it's good. I want it. Gotta have it. And it makes me feel nice. So right. It's so nice.
That was gross. That made me feel icky. Like, grossed out. Like, that sucks. It's like, I like how they were like, back in the 70s, like, subliminal messaging, if you play it backwards, is giving you stuff. Just straight up to your face. Bicep, 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 you'll feel better. That's exactly what they just were saying. Feels so good. Biceps. Like, fucking shit, that's terrible. That's where we're at as a society. Fantastic. Nah, it's just straight up like fucking. We are taking advantage of your bad feelings.
Your sex and let your government steal your money.
Yeah, and all your bad feelings will go away. Like,
this fucking shit.
What?
The cost, the crime, the corruption, and the cover-up. But now we know that he cannot protect our people or our country. We've just received these documents that Trudeau has been covering up for years. Documents related to a massive security breach at the Trudeau government's most sensitive laboratory, where the most dangerous viruses and pathogens are studied and handled. That the Trudeau government's head of pathogens was collaborating with members of Beijing's People's Liberation Army who were responsible for bioweapons and bioterrorism. We know now that a People's Liberation Army official was able to get personal access, walk in the door, look at computers, and have access to all of our most important virological secrets. If you think any of this is hyperbole, read the report yourself. This is from
Oh
Government
no, I
documents,
recommend
Trudeau
people go
documents,
do
says
a week
here on page
at the
142,
Trudeau
Winnipeg
airport,
lab scientist
and
Dr.
you will
Trudeau is
realize
head
how
of the special
ridiculous
pathogens unit,
airport security is.
top person in
It's
that
all
function.
fucking for
According to
nothing.
documents
Like
on
it's
page
just
242,
theater.
quote, represents a serious and credible danger to the government of Canada as a whole, and in particular at facilities considered high security due to the potential for theft of dangerous materials attractive to terrorists and foreign entities that conduct espionage.
Like the guy that does the
damage
exit
the
door
economic
for
security
the airport,
of Canada, end quote.
he goes home at 9. Like,
Take further.
but like if you
39.
work at Starbucks
Investigators
and there's
assessed that
a
Dr.
flight
Chu
that
communicated with
was
foreign
delayed and
entities
is
during
still
her
waiting to
time.
come in,
The evidence
you don't get to
obtained from
leave
interviews and from information collected from the
until the
electronic
flight
content
comes
of our
in.
devices reveal
Make sure
that
that
this
people that
is
comes
indeed
out
the
of their
case.
flight can have a
As a
coffee.
subject matter expert with access to sensitive information and dangerous materials, Dr. Chu presents a realistic and credible threat.
But like
to
that
Canada's
means
economic
the
security when
exit
conducting
is not.
repeated and clandestine
There's no security
meetings
guard there at
with
the
foreign
exit.
entities, end
So if
quote.
someone walks out the exit, you can just walk in the airport,
Says
and you're
Dr.
on the
Chu
international
conducted
side.
joint research with the
Like,
Major
Which means
General
you're
Chen Wei
getting
of
checked
the
by
People's
police or anything
Liberation
to
Army, who, according to page 236,
That's true. Yeah,
is
that's
a
true.
noted top virologist
Yeah.
at the Academy of Military Medical Sciences and is China's chief biological defense expert engaged in research related to biosafety, biodefense, and bioterrorism. Bioterrorism, end quote. These are documents. This is right out of the government's own documents. Trudeau, what did he do?
Since you're
when he
both
found out
bored,
about
why don't
this?
you take them?
Did he immediately inform Canadians of
Ow.
the breach? Did
I
he
stabbed
fire
myself in the eyes
anybody?
with tweezers.
No one was fired.
I'm eating your
Did he
food.
call an inquiry to get to the bottom
I'm
of
eating
it?
your food.
No, he didn't do that either.
It's
Instead,
crazy.
he covered it all up. He defied 4 parliamentary orders to release these documents. When the speaker tried to get them, he sued the speaker to cover this up. He said it was all for national security, but well, we know from a committee composed of, including 1 Liberal, and 3 judges, and I quote, the information appears to be mostly about protecting the organization from embarrassment for failures in policy and implementation, not legitimate national security concerns, and its release is essential to hold the government to account. In other words, there was no national security reason why we couldn't have had this before. It was only because Trudeau didn't want the embarrassment before an election. So what did he do then? He collaborated, knowing this, he collaborated with Beijing to buy a vaccine for COVID. Could you imagine if the deal that Trudeau wanted to sign with Beijing had gone ahead and we had procured
I guess not really.
China-made vaccines?
As long as you make sure you watch where you walk.
This information, that's what was in
Yeah,
his
but
head.
the wind and the water we had.
And if you think for a minute, because I know there'll be all kinds of excuses, well, he's
Honestly,
not
I have no idea.
responsible, and how could he possibly take
I would do
ownership of
something
what
anyway.
happens in his government? Let me quote him. Here's a document
Do it
called
now?
Open and Accountable Government.
I'm gonna get dressed.
And I quote, as head of government, the Prime
Let's go.
Minister has special responsibilities for national security, end quote. It's his responsibility.
Why you
This
like
is his
slumped
government's
over?
lab, not a
Like
random university lab. It's the top lab for the Prime
you're gonna
Minister's
abuse
public
fucking child.
health
Right?
agency. And
Why
he
is it so
is
hard being Jack?
exclusively responsible for the machinery of government
Woe
as
is
Prime Minister
me.
of the country. So this is on Justin Trudeau. I will add one last thing. Not only did he cover up,
You won't do that with your food.
not
You eat
only
it.
did he try to get a vaccine
Come around and
after knowing this, he called a snap election to make sure that the voting would happen before this came out. What happened in that election? Beijing interfered
Yeah.
to help him win it.
Yeah, for sure.
This is a man who
I'm
says
almost
the entire
positive Jack
United
needs to sing
States
one.
Communists cannot trust Justin Trudeau to keep our people and its country safe. We need a strong, conservative, common sense government that will root out foreign interference, protect our critical secrets and our medical research, and stand on guard for our country to keep our people and our nation safe.
On the Winnipeg lab, do you think the National Microbiology Lab infectious disease researchers should be allowed to do any at this point?
No,
Why?
because we know that in this instance.
Because
that,
they're a dictatorship.
Our highest placed, most sensitive lab was infiltrated by.
I don't know one person that I know for like and that will determine whether you can leave the country. Like take a plane. Like it restricts your travel. You will literally be like you literally starve to death because you're not allowed to go buy stuff because you don't have enough credits.
So I don't think this is the kind of collaboration we want. We should be collaborating with like-minded democracies that we can trust, not those that want to attack our interests.
Don't expect Justin Trudeau to take a walk in the snow anytime soon. Hi, I'm Brian Woodley, political columnist for the Toronto Sun. 40 years ago, February 29th, 1984, Pierre Trudeau, then Prime Minister of Canada, took a walk in the snow, he told reporters, and thought about his future and decided it was time to step down. Well, with that anniversary of poorly in the polls, people are asking, is Trudeau going to step down? And Warren Kinsella, fellow Sun columnist, he thinks he will. He thinks that Trudeau having the dental and the pharmacare deal with the NDP gives him enough runway to step down, for the NDP to keep supporting the Liberals, and for the party to find a new leader. I don't buy it. Yes, the polls are bad, and let's take a look at them. The latest Leger poll has a 16-point lead for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. Nanos has a 17-point lead for the Conservatives, and Abacus has the same, 17 points. Look over at 338 Canada. They're projecting 89 seats for the Conservatives in Ontario alone, sweeping Prince Edward Island, taking most of the seats in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and the most in British Columbia. So why wouldn't that push Trudeau to leave? It might, but I don't think he will. The man has a true desire to fight Pierre Poilievre. Trudeau is a fighter. I've watched him in the House of Commons. I was one of the people calling the fight with Senator Patrick Brazeau ringside. The man has a fighting spirit, and he loves campaigning. Horrible at governing, but loves campaigning. So I don't see him going anywhere. He's also got this messianic complex where he thinks he's the only one that can truly fix the problems of the country. Jen Gerson.
A lot of them have like a crazy messiah complex where they think that it saves the day and everyone's gonna be like, oh my god, you're so great. We would never have been able to get here without you. It's like, but that's so fucked up. Like, that's like, to me, like bordering on schizophrenia.
We're done. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment down below. Share this on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
I can't remember who was saying it, but there was some woman who was saying like it's there's a bunch of people with like I'll fall my chair. Oh, someone was saying like I think it might have been Pierre Poilievre who was saying like there's like a hero complex that's going on. Those are always silent, like the silent bus driver that gets you to and from work every day safely. Like, you don't hear that guy going around and be like, hey, everybody, you're welcome. Like,
and I think a lot of people, it seems like they continue to play this game. Like, how much can we needle him? How much can we surround Russia before it's like a caged bear?
No, I think that's right. And you would think at this point they would have figured it out after almost 3 years. It's a big mistake to underestimate the Russians. They're actually quite serious about defending their country, which is what they demonstrated when they went into eastern Ukraine. But I think the important thing to keep in mind with these nuclear missiles is as follows. If you try to enter Russian sovereign territory on the ground with any European or American military
you will die.
Nations, if you strike us on the ground, anything that is significant, we have the capability to annihilate you.
Oh, yeah.
We'll use it. we will start at the tactical level.
Yeah, you don't see fucking Putin doing a military parade.
They're not about to back down and leave Ukraine under any circumstances.
Huh?
And they're certainly not interested in the war. If they were, we'd have been at war with Russia a long time ago. That's obvious.
Kim Jong Un does that every
But they're not
year.
gonna sit there
Comes out and he does a big parade.
and we have nothing with which to challenge them. Our ground forces are in ruins. I'm sure you've seen the news with Macron, who stood up and turned himself into the proverbial turd in the punch bowl by suggesting that Europeans should be prepared to march into eastern Ukraine.
Yeah, Napoleon.
Yeah, except Napoleon actually had a real army. You know,
It's a really bad one.
there's 72,000 troops in the British Army. The French army is a little larger.
Unless you had some
But these are boutique
syphilis.
forces. They're all designed to essentially
That was a good
impress
one.
people that can't defend themselves in North Africa or the Middle East or,
So I was
or
always like
Africa
this.
itself. I mean, they don't have forces that are
It was only
designed to
hard.
fight anybody who can fight back.
What do you make of the back and forth then with Macron saying we're not taking this off the table to put ground forces in Ukraine on the part of the French government? Olaf Scholz then having to come out and deliver a video message where he says, under no circumstances, as I, Chancellor of Germany, would put forces into Ukraine. Maybe this, by the way, I was kind of reading into that. I was really studying his language there because I think you speak German, you understand. The way what he was saying specifically is I, as Chancellor, would not put ground forces into Ukraine of Germany. But he doesn't have the power to do that. The Bundestag does. So he wouldn't be the one that would put ground forces in there anyway. Anyway, I found that interesting, this back and forth between he and Macron. What did you make of that?
Well, strictly speaking, Schultz fancies himself.
Germans shouldn't get involved in any war whatsoever.
For World War I.
For what they did.
I feel like they've been really quiet for the past 50 years for pretty good reason.
Exactly.
They know why.
He wanted given to him by the emperor.
Like,
So I think there's a certain amount of self-delusion involved with that. But he knows the Germans have no interest.
but the Prime Minister
Nobody in Europe
of
has
Germany, she just
going
retired.
to war in Ukraine. All of this is a proxy effort.
Honestly,
What
the
should we do in
Prime
Russia? You would
Minister
think by now
of Germany,
fools would recognize that all
she was
they've
like
done
this
is
little old
strengthen
lady,
Russia.
and her and
Russia
Putin
is stronger
were the
militarily
cutest.
now
Every
than
time they
since
go
the
for a meeting,
1980s.
Putin brings her a bouquet of
Now they're
flowers.
showing you the latest
It's just the
tactical nuclear
sweetest thing, and he's just like, will like take her coat and shit, and like do her seat for her. I'm like, you're the cutest.
Vaporize airfields.
And she's always like super excited to see
as
him.
needed. The other thing is, we don't have any air defense. In other words, we talk about air and missile defense. We really don't have much.
In the United States?
Well, both in the United States and in Europe.
It's us.
We've
We
always
are your
had
air
our
defense.
forces.
Canada is
The
your air
underlying
defense.
assumption is
Boeing.
that our thing and drop bombs with impunity and launch missiles with impunity. That's not really true anymore. The Russians are heavily invested in integrated air defenses, integrated air and missile defenses. They're
Anti-supersonic
quite
missiles.
prepared to deal
They're-
with us.
they're the only
because
country
we
that has
rely
that,
exclusively
technology
on the
right
Air
now.
Force, and to be blunt, that's all we've got right now.
We have the
Terrifying to think about. We talk about Star Wars of the 1980s. We talk about the Iron Dome in Israel, right? But the United States is sort of a sitting duck here. We can't even handle quote unquote Chinese spy balloons flying over Montana for crying out loud.
And it's like that was the second time that they flew over too.
Remember that famous story? So it's unbelievable to me. I think a lot of people sort of sitting back going about their day-to-day business here, but NATO just keeps going, keeps expanding. Jens Stoltenberg last week telling Zelensky, long-range weapons, we're giving you the green light to attack inside of Russia.
This is on public
This is
television,
going
you
right
idiot.
up to their back door. I mean, something has to give here. I mean, we're at this like boiling point moment here, and I don't know what do you think is going to give?
NATO is never so weak as when it appears to be strong. The more talk you hear about unity of effort and larger, more powerful NATO capabilities, the less seriously you should take any of these comments. You've got 32 states today constituting the so-called NATO alliance. Getting agreement on much of anything, including, which door do we use in the conference room to get to the bathroom, is impossible. There's no unity of thinking or effort at all. The whole sham alliance is designed to create avenues of approach for Europeans to us. It's another channel of communication to try and acquire U.S. favor and support and backing. These are all small countries today. They're much like the Greek city-states in the age of the Roman Empire. We're a sort of declining Rome at this point. I think Americans will figure that out and act against it. We're a declining Rome. The European states are like the little Greek city-states that were entirely dependent upon Roman military power to save them from the Macedonians. This whole business is a sham. NATO is probably not going to survive. I wouldn't pay any attention to any of it. I think Schultz knows that if he takes a stupid decision, let's send 3 German brigades, towards Belarus or something like that, he'll be out of office. Not only will his political structure collapse, will the economy tank, but the whole NATO alliance will go out of business.
I want to ask you to put on your political hat for a moment. Of course, you served Donald Trump at the Pentagon, and you see what's happening now in an election year. You see this back and forth fighting over Ukraine aid. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, saying, look, I'm not giving up this leverage that we have, which is this Ukraine aid, to try to get something done at the U.S.
Apparently, the turtle guy.
But at the end of the day,
apparently he had a heart attack. He's retiring.
Says, I see Congress passing this money. There's going to be another $60 billion that'll flow to Ukraine. What do you think is going to happen in Washington? Will this aid get passed, moved towards Ukraine?
On one hand, Victoria Nuland is referring to the structure of power in Washington, which is entirely in the hands of the great lobby and lobbies. Right. In other words, not the Israel lobby, the defense lobby, any number of wealthy billionaire oligarchs that have bought up politicians for years. They are ultimately made. So she's banking on that working. There's a problem with that assumption. And the problem is that everyone in the United States who is an American citizen, I'm talking about Americans, those of us that don't hyphenate our identity, those of us who don't live here part-time or only when the weather's good or something.
Thank you.
We are not interested in
how long have I been saying this for, though? And people are like, being a Torontonian from the GTA, it's like, yeah, for like 4 months of the year. Like, yeah, like people that are like, I'm from Montreal, France, right? So it's like, yeah, but you're English, and you're only here for like tourist months.
In Washington, D.C. to provide for permanent up. They figured that out. They're watching the criminality. We could sit here and talk for hours about all the crimes committed by these recently arrived so-called migrants. They're just illegal aliens that the administration has decided to let in. And they've got lots of backing from wealthy people. You've got people like the Koch brothers that support this sort of thing for reasons that they have that are exclusively of importance to them. There's no one with any real money or power influencing Washington decision-making in favor of the country.
Terrible.
In other words, you, I, and millions of us are really not represented. So we're told, stand around, sit down, don't get excited, and let us overrun your country and create a new majority that will govern you and reduce you effectively to a shameless, mindless consumer.
Yup.
Be part of the sheeple and shut up.
Yup.
And don't worry about the economy. We'll continue to print money.
Because you're causing mischief.
Oh, this is great. Well, a third and a half of that's government money anyway.
Right.
People don't seem to get it. You've talked about the economy. That thing is on its way down into the abyss. But until it strikes, people will stand back and they'll wonder and wait. But at some point, things that fall into the abyss eventually reach bottom. And then all hell is going to break loose. But no one today who is going to vote and wants to vote, who cares about the country, gives a damn what's happening in Eastern Europe, or for that matter, in the Middle East. No one's interested in joining these wars. They don't want us to be dragged into these wars. They want things to be made right here at home. And if I were advising President Trump, and I'm sure he has plenty of people telling those, it doesn't matter what you say about the other things. What is the top issue for American people? Border security, end to illegal immigration, crush the criminality, expel the illegals. That's what Americans want. Talk about that, you're going to get elected. I think he knows that.
You know Trump very well. If he becomes president again, clearly it looks like he's going to win the Republican nomination unless something crazy happens with Nikki Haley in the deep state wanting to install her in his stead. But if he becomes the Republican nominee and if he goes on to win the election, and you were to advise the president, what would you advise him to do on Ukraine?
Well, as far as Ukraine is concerned, I would immediately announce a suspension of all aid to the Ukrainian regime, to Zelensky. Then privately, through channels, I would let Moscow know that we're interested in settling this issue as quickly as possible. Let us know when and where you want to meet, and we'll help settle this issue. And I would inform all of our NATO allies of the same thing. So that's the way you handle Ukraine. It's not going to happen overnight. I know he says, well, I can stop this in 24 hours. But even if you told the Russians you were going to do that, they'd wait for 2 weeks to see whether or not you did it.
Right.
There's no reason for them to believe us.
Well, they know in the Tucker Carlson interview, they've been lied to multiple times. Promises made by Bill Clinton, promises made by George W. Bush, promises made over and over again. They're going to sit back and wait to see if this is a legitimate move or not. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to watch what Donald Trump does on these big issues. He's paying attention.
One thing to remember about President Trump is that every one of his rallies that he attended in 2016, when he was running for election the first time, you had tens of thousands of people chant the same slogan over and over and over again: "Build the wall, build the wall, build the wall." He was elected, and what did he do?
Built the fucking wall.
On Obamacare. My concern is much will depend upon the people who surround him, the people to whom he listens. And I'm not being encouraged by the so-called America First Institute down in Florida and the people that are there, or the usual suspects that go back to the last administration that seem to populate his inner circle. So I just don't know. So for me to say categorically he will do X, Y, and Z is impossible.
Right.
I just don't.
Yeah, I think, that's exactly right. There's so many people surrounding him. You know, the idea of draining the swamp, that was the goal, right? To drain the swamp. It only got larger under Trump. And a lot of people say, well, it was the people surrounding him that insulated the swamp from being drained. Is there truth to that?
Absolutely. If you look at what's happening right now in the Middle East, all sorts of people are saying they're watching every day as hundreds of human beings are being slaughtered in Gaza. Well, some will say, well, they're Arabs. We've been brainwashed to think that Arabs are unworthy of being treated equally with everybody else. How could that be avoided when you look at the long-term occupation in Iraq and so forth? But the majority of people are not pleased with it. They don't like it, and they know that we're supporting it. So the question is, how do you stop it? It's very simple. The President of the United States tells Mr. Netanyahu, I am withdrawing all support immediately until such time I see evidence that you are changing what you are doing in Gaza. Now, he's not going to do that. Never will do that. So it doesn't make any difference what Sullivan or the rest of these people say, or how many times they bring out the crying cow and express concern for the people in Gaza. They're not going to change anything. Sometime over the next 90 days, the only way to change these things is for a major war to break out in the region. And that means that the Arab states that surround Israel are not really capable of taking on and defeating Israel. This is the big myth of what's the existential threat to Israel. Well, it certainly isn't an Arab threat. That leaves you basically with the Turks and the Iranians. The Iranians are not going to attack anyone unless they themselves are attacked. They've made that very clear. But they're also not going to allow Hezbollah to be destroyed. And that appears to be the next target for Mr. Netanyahu. So that opens up another can of worms. And then you have Mr. Erdogan. He's under tremendous pressure at home to do something. And in many ways, have a huge impact. He might succeed in diverting the Israelis from what they're doing without necessarily going to war. But he's the one power in the region with 90 million Turks, armed forces in NATO, and very capable fighting forces, not the nonsense we see in Western Europe. We're talking about serious army formations full of Turks who will eagerly kill the enemy. That's what he's got. And that should give the Israelis pause. But thus far, Mr. Erdogan has talked a good game, but he hasn't really heavily engaged. So unless something in the region happens, Mr. Netanyahu will continue to do what he's doing. But he's overreaching. There's no question about it. It's only a matter of time. Those who overreach fail. We've seen that in history many, many times. If he goes into Lebanon, he's overreaching.
well, if he continues this massive slaughter in Rafah, we'll see what the international community does. We'll see what Egypt does to respond.
You didn't see what's in the neighbor's window.
To flow into the open-air
2
prison.
Palestinian flags.
And we'll see what the United States does.
The kids.
Basically silent.
The 2 kids painted 2 Palestinian flags, put them in the window, in the front window.
Palestinians. We've been telling them not to shoot civilians.
Fuck
We've been we've used strong words. We've been using strong words.
Right.
But that's about all.
Well, like, and it's not
Greg,
because,
great to see you,
like,
as
I
always.
have
Thank you
Middle
so much
Eastern
for your
neighbors,
insights,
this is
your
why I
time.
put it
We
up.
appreciate
Like,
it.
if this was happening in in Hawaii, if it was happening in anywhere, like, it doesn't matter where this is happening, anybody with, like, more than half a brain and, like, who has a heart and soul can see this and be like, something's not fucking right here, it's so wrong. Like, it's like, and no one's doing anything about it. Like,
we've got more news to get to here on your Thursday. We're gonna look at the spying on Tucker Carlson. So Tucker just revealed some.
like, there's no excuse to be fucking bombing fucking hospitals or, like,
the NSA was.
I don't give a shit what your excuse is. I really don't.
And I know he kind of puts on a front that he's maybe
Just because
not really
X amount of
pissed
people
off
died
about
does
it.
not mean that you have the right to now go kill X amount of people that you feel like is like a good.
So we're going to dive into that story in a moment, right after the break. But first, we're going to tell you about our friends at Moomoo, because right now, do you find yourself with a substantial amount of cash that's currently just sitting idle, not generating returns? Like you're sitting there waiting, what should I do with this? Should I buy gold? Should I buy silver? Should I buy stocks? What should I do?
You're an asshat. I
While that
hate you.
cash is sitting there, it's losing.
I hate you. I'm not. There's nobody I've ever known in my lifetime that is just like, I just have extra money sitting around.
Bitcoin went.
Oh, good.
Like, how can you be confident into a currency that in a week it can go to 14,000 to 63,000 and drop back to 9,000? Who's gonna pay you 64,000 when they know it's gonna drop to 14,000? You know?
Like, is the Bitcoin machine going to, like, be your ATM and give you some cash? Because I don't think they do that.
I don't think they do.
They do not. I know they do not, because it's not real money. You just took your money from your real bank account.
Oh!
What? What?
We're 20. I need to roll with 20.
No, you literally took money from your real bank account. It was your real. You transferred it over into Bitcoin, which is not real money. It's this magical monopoly money that's made up. It's not real, and you'll never see that money again.
Right.
Like, and if you can find services that like are like they take your Bitcoin, congrats. Like, good. All power to you.
Spy on him and stop him from talking to Vladimir Putin and Edward Snowden and more. It's actually amazing. So journalist Tucker Carlson has come forward with some stunning information about his interview with Putin. Tried to stop it. Tried to totally stop it from happening. His lawyers warned him not to do it and to do the interview because they had it on good authority. One of the biggest law firms in the world told Tucker not to do the interview, that they had it on good authority that Tucker would be arrested over sanctions violations for interviewing Putin. Because, it's a country under sanctions right now, sanctions that haven't worked, by the way. He was asked first by Lex Friedman in this, it's like a 3-hour interview.
Fucking hate the Lex Friedman bullshit.
Because it's wide-ranging. But among the issues I think that matter most to Americans, this piece stood out to me. And we'll link up the interview in the description below our video if you want to watch the full 3-hour interview. It's worth it. Anyway, he was asked first, do you fear for your life? Did you fear for your life? Were you nervous, if you asked tough questions of Putin, would it cause you harm? Listen.
But did you feel like, are there things I shouldn't say? I mean, how honest do you want me to be? I mean it when I say I felt not one for the 8 days that I was there. Maybe I just didn't, and I feel like I've got a pretty strong gut sense of things. I rely on it. I make all my decisions based on how I feel, my instincts, and I didn't feel it at all. my lawyers before I left, and these are people who work for a big law firm. This is not Bob's law firm. This is one of the biggest law firms in the world. Said, you're going to get arrested if you do this by the U.S. government on sanctions violations. And I said, well, I don't recognize the legitimacy of that actually, because I'm American and I've lived here my whole life, and that's so outrageous that I'm happy to face that.
Good
that
for
risk
you.
because I so reject the premise.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm an American. I should be able to talk to anyone I want
Yeah.
to, and I plan to exercise that freedom, which I think I was born with.
Yeah.
And I gave them this long.
Good for you. That's what I'm saying. Your rights are not rights
But
if you,
that
they can be
was,
taken away from you. They're temporary privileges.
It was
No one tells me that whether or not I get anything happen, I was making a point to leave my house every day because nobody tells me what the fuck to do. Like, nobody tells me where to go or who I can talk
a
to.
10-page memo on it, and their sincere conclusion was, do not do this. And of course, it made me mad, so I was lecturing on the phone, and I had another call with the head lawyer.
Tell me not to do it, do it.
On the questions that you ask Putin, if you're seen as too nice to him, you
Don't
could get
ask for
arrested when you come
permission,
back.
like.
And I was like, you're describing a fascist country. Okay?
Yeah.
You're saying that the U.S. government will arrest me if I don't ask the questions they want to ask?
Yes,
Is that what
sir.
you're saying? Well, we just think based on what's happened that that's possible. Can you imagine?
And these are people who have his best interest. They're being paid to have his best interest at heart.
Yeah, they're his lawyers.
Right. And he's saying, my best interests are free speech for everybody and free flowing information and no control of an interview like this. And they're saying, oh no, doing it the government's way is your safest bet.
And we don't know, right? We don't know because we're not in that law firm, but it's the most powerful law firm. I think I know exactly what law firm this is. And they have incredible connections, right? So this isn't just like them just sitting around a boardroom and like, yeah, we think you'll be arrested. No. They made phone calls, studying precedent.
Oh, you made a phone
They're
call.
really investigating this to present this to Tucker Carlson with a 10-page memo
Yeah.
to say, no, you're going to be arrested.
Now, to be fair, a lawyer is paid to worry for your worst case scenario.
True.
So that's what he's asking them is what is the worst case scenario? And they are saying this, right? But it's not too far out of left field given we see journalists arrested in the UK for their coverage. We've seen this is not out, is a non-zero possibility.
Well, and then when you add that into the NSA piece of this, which is the NSA caught spying on Tucker Carlson multiple times now. So he was asked about this and explaining how the NSA had been spying on him years ago when he tried to set up this interview, about 3 years ago, verified that. And now again, a few weeks ago, on his way to Moscow. Listen.
I'm just telling you what happened.
So you were okay being arrested in Moscow?
I didn't think
and
I was
arrested in...
I didn't think for a second. I mean, maybe look, I'd never been there before. Everything about the culture was brand new to me. You know, ignorance does protect you, sort of, when you have no freaking idea what's going on. You're not worried about it. Like, this has happened to me many times. It extends throughout life. So it's completely possible that I was in grave peril and didn't know it. It's like, how would I know it? You know, I'm like a bumbling English speaker from California. But I didn't feel it at all.
But the lawyers did.
Yeah, I mean, it scared the crap out of people. You're going to... And look, and you have to pay in cash. They don't take credit cards because of sanctions. And you have to go through all these hoops, just procedural hoops, to go to Russia, which I was willing to do because I wanted to interview Putin, because they told me I couldn't. But then there's another fact, which is that I was being surveilled by the U.S. government, intensely surveilled by the U.S. government. And this came out. They admitted it. NSA admitted it a couple of years ago that they were up in my Signal account. And then they leaked it to the New York Times. They did that again before I left. And I know that because 2 New York Times reporters, one of whom I actually like, said, oh, you're going, and called other people. Oh, he's going to interview Putin. I hadn't told anybody that. Like, anybody. My wife, 2 producers, that's it. So they got that from the government. Then I'm over there, and of course I want to see Snowden, who I admire. And so we have a mutual friend, so I got his text and come on over, and Snowden does not want publicity at all. And so, but I really wanted to have dinner with him. So we had dinner in my hotel room.
Cool.
At the Four Seasons in Moscow. And I tried to convince him, I'd love to do an interview, shoot it on my iPhone. You know, I'd love to take a picture together and put it on the internet because I just want to show support, because I think he's been railroaded. He had no interest in living in Russia, no intention of being in Russia. The whole thing is a lie. But anyway, whatever. All this stuff. And he just said, respectfully, I'd rather not anyone know that we met. Great. The only reason I'm telling you this is because, and I didn't tell anybody, and I didn't text it to anybody, okay, except him. Semaphore runs this piece saying, reporting information that got from the U.S. intel agencies, leaking against me using my money in my name in a supposedly free country. They run this piece saying I'd met with Snowden, like it was a crime or something. So again, my interest is in the United States and preserving freedoms here, the ones that I grew up with. And if you have a media establishment that acts as an auxiliary of, or acts as employees of the national security state, you don't have a free country.
Do you have a free country? You have the NSA leaking information that they glean from his cell phone, leaking into the New York Times? I mean, how is that?
No, but you see how meta this is we know that this happens because of Edward Snowden, and then it is happening with the meeting about Edward Snowden. You know?
Okay, so what are you saying?
I'm not saying
tell her.
okay, but the
Tell him,
reason this is not surprising is because of the man he's meeting with, is Edward Snowden.
Yeah, but it's just like a healthy serving of irony.
Yes.
Yeah,
with
right,
that.
exactly.
Yeah, you save it from her.
It's not like they're sitting there and all.
They were literally saying that on one of the episodes, that he's like the buffers for their awkward, like, fucking little
The
spats.
reason they know about the Edward Snowden meetings because they've been watching it ahead of time.
And the point I'm making, we could go another route,
Guys.
is that we are not
Kangaroo
surprised by
fucking
this
you.
because of Edward Snowden.
Yeah. Well, then also he talks about his phone draining. Now, when you first realize this, like, why am I just charged my phone? Why is it suddenly down to 0? Listen to this.
So the NSA was tracking you? Do you think CIA was? Is people still tracking you?
Look, one of the things I did before I went, just because of the business I'm in, all of us are in, just because we live here, you know, we all have theories about secure communications channels. Like Signal is secure,
Nope.
Telegraph isn't, or WhatsApp is.
Signal was secure when it was
So I thought,
like.
you know, before I go over here, I was getting all this. We're having all this.
I downloaded Signal fucking in
And
2009.
I decided, I'm just gonna.
I was still in high school when I downloaded it onto my iPod Touch.
So I talked to 2 people.
Made by the CIA.
Who would know?
It was bought by the CIA.
And
It was made by random fucking.
And Telegram is monitored by
And both of them
FBI.
said exactly the same thing, which is, are you joking?
Because I
Nothing
also
is
used to use the Text Me
Everything's
app.
monitored all the time.
And the Text Me
If the
app,
actors are involved.
the cool
So
thing
you
about
can
it is
keep
it changes
you
your
know,
phone number every time
whatever,
you use
the
it.
Malaysian mafia.
Every time you
Or
open the app, it
probably.
changes your phone number.
You
Send
cannot
a
keep the big
message,
intel service.
vocal text,
It's not
in
possible.
Messenger.
Any of them.
Because
Or
when
listening
they
to
pull that data back,
So,
they see the text
and
message
that was
with
the
a
firm
plate
conclusion of
thingy
people
with the
who've been
dots.
involved in it,
Can't
you know,
hear it
for a long time, decades.
because it's not in the
So
vocal.
I just thought, you know what? I don't care. I don't care. I'm not sending a ton of naked pictures of myself to anybody. Not a ton, just not. I'm 54, dude. Probably not.
Because my people don't give me any
Uh,
love.
Because, so I'm like, I'm just, so the guys travel with 3 people I work with who I love, who I've been around the world with. And they all got, you know, separate phones, and I'm leaving my other phone back in New York or whatever. And I just decided I don't care, actually. And I resent having no privacy. Because privacy is a prerequisite for freedom. But I can't change it, and so I have the same surveilled cell phone. And you know, I do switch them out because there it is.
Before you got
Because if you have too much spyware on your phone, this is true. It wrecks the battery. And
you want another?
no, I'm serious.
Oh, you want
It does. And we got. It was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. We went to North Korea, and my phone started acting crazy. And so I talked to someone on the National Security Council who actually called me about this. Somehow knew that your phone is being surveilled by the South Korean
So
government.
hot that it drains your battery?
I like the South Korean government. Why would they do that?
That's why my battery's always draining.
So, but I could tell because all of a sudden the thing was draining in like 45 minutes. So that is.
I guess it's a cautionary tale out there. If your phone suddenly drains to 0, you know, if you're a journalist or you're somebody the government is threatened by, chances are you're being surveilled, I guess, by the intel community. It's outrageous. A journalist in the United States going to another country to do an interview like this would be surveilled, and then leak. But even more than that, because we know that they're surveilling everyone. But then we know that from Edward Snowden, right? That they're already doing that. But then leaking it to the New York Times, their mouthpiece of the intelligence state, like the Washington Post. Like I said again, how do you think they got that story, that scoop in Ukraine about the CIA station houses that they went? The CIA called them up and said, "Come on over here to Ukraine. We're going to give you a tour of our CIA station houses here in Ukraine." It's not a scoop. They're just a mouthpiece of the intelligence state.
What's crazy is us, to citizens, to journalists, but Assange can't do that to the military. That's not okay. But it's okay for them to just reveal information on private citizens willy-nilly.
No, you can't do that to the Pentagon. You absolutely can't do that to the Pentagon. Or you'll be tried as a traitor on espionage charges, I guess.
It's thin ice, you guys. Thin ice.
Fuck you, such a.
All right, well, we're going to continue to talk about Edward Snowden. We're going to talk about Canada's attacks on free speech because that's the way of the West. And we're going to talk about why liberals are so upset that their teenagers have a conservative bent.
Honestly, I don't like
happening.
her. I don't like her as a person, but she should just go start her own
here
thing.
on Redacted. So let's talk about Edward Snowden because he predicts that some government is buying up Bitcoin on the slide as a replacement for monetary
birds
gold.
were like
Here was
freaking
a
out in the
prediction
middle of the
on
episode
X that
because
he
you
made this
what
week.
everyone was saying.
Prediction a national
You can see
government
that
will
they're
be
clearly
revealed
really
this
pissed
year
off.
to have been buying Bitcoin, the modern replacement for monetary gold, without having disclosed that fact publicly. Now, why is that a hot topic right now? Because Bitcoin is surging up to its all-time high of around $60,000 per Bitcoin after circling the drain for most of the pandemic. It seems to be back. So it cannot be El Salvador because El Salvador is buying it with full disclosure and has been since 2021 when they announced they would accept it as legal tender. Now, El Salvador President Nayib Bukele has been talking about the surge in Bitcoin this week and kind of taking a victory lap. Take a look at this. He says when Bitcoin's market price was low, they wrote literally thousands of articles about our supposed losses. Now that Bitcoin's market price is way up, if we were to sell, we would make over 40%, he says,
that's where they are.
profit. Yeah. And our main source of Bitcoin is now our citizenship program. He says we won't sell, of course. And he says, remember this next time they spill lies about El Salvador. Now, I want to take a second to talk about Bukele because I want to say he would be a media darling. He's well spoken. He's really handsome. Right, Clayton? I was trying to see.
Right, Clayton?
Okay.
I don't know if he's really handsome. I just say that sometimes to see if you're listening.
I'm paying attention.
He's handsome. I
Do that when you marry her.
media
No,
darling. I would say he's more
and
than
he's very
so.
handsome. Clayton.
We're talking about.
And like, oh yeah, like
I'm going on my tangent.
very, I don't know what
Boris
you guys
Johnson,
have.
on a list, longer list.
He's not a media darling.
Boris Johnson.
No,
No.
not a media darling. The media loves to hate him.
nice to
Handsome media darlings, I don't know, like Macron. All right, I derailed that. I just wanted to see what your response was to me calling him handsome. Anyway, look at what the Associated Press did with his
And they were, like, thrown
CPAC
out.
attendance lately. They're saying he got a
Whatever
rock
that other
star
dude
welcome.
more professional than
When
the other one.
U.S. investor Peter
there's, like,
Schiff
now, like, the
responded about
brand
this Bitcoin
And like they
tweet,
don't say
he
what
says, you better talk about these profits
Oh, it's
after
nothing to do
you
with
sell
the guy
and
with
realize
the
them.
glasses?
That's him
President
too.
Bukele says, just cry
There's
harder.
also another
So
guy.
he's
that
not having it.
randomly
He's
will,
a
like, put
bit,
it in
I
Bitcoin.
want to say, kind of Trump.
And, like,
He doesn't suffer fools.
Yeah,
He-
they just
he
don't even
says what he
acknowledge,
thinks.
like-
He's a little bit rogue, right?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
But there was a bunch of people
as
that
an
were saying,
aside,
they're like, oh,
this
the
video
third guy is
went
there
viral
just like
this
so to
month
make
when
it like
he
less
explains
awkward when
how
they
he
like
took
start to
El
argue.
Salvador from the safest places in the world because Europeans and Western governments are saying, you can't do it that way.
Robbie.
We took the recipes from the European Union, we took the recipes from the United States. None of the recipes worked. More bloodshed, more people were dying. So what do? Okay, we do something and we save people. And now we're the safest country in the Western Hemisphere.
Who are
But
you?
suddenly something's bad. Oh, but you shouldn't do that. You should do what I think you should do. Why? If it, not only we have the right to do what decide whether or not they want this day in free elections, but also we've proven it works. And you haven't proven that your system works in our country. Might work in yours, I don't know. But it doesn't work in ours. It's like I told one time a member of the European Union, I know you Brexited that, but I told a member of the European Union, you take your best government, choose your best government. I don't know what's the best government in Europe, but you choose your best government. Same people, same will to do things the right way. You take your best government and you put him to govern Afghanistan and tell them, okay, you govern Afghanistan the same way you govern this European country. You'll be there in a week because you cannot govern Afghanistan like you govern Europe. So stop trying to make us use your recipes because they don't work here. You have your own system. I mean, we're fine with your monarchy. We love your monarchy. It's fine. But we don't say, oh, you shouldn't have a monarchy. You shouldn't have hereditary titles. And why? Because it's your country. You can do whatever you want with it. But suddenly, we have to do what you want to do with our country.
So
look at the Arab world.
Wow.
This is the big
We love your monarchy. We don't care about it.
Come in there and tell them how to run their countries. They're not interested in Buffalo Wild Wings.
You come as a king in Afghanistan, they'll treat you like a king.
Things that Westerners want. They're not interested in the movie theaters. They're not interested in the things that the United States wants. Or wants to push on drinking alcohol, right? Saudi Arabia finally
I understand.
just opened their first
what the rules are.
last week.
Like,
but it's like, why do you want to push alcohol? Why is that so important? And so these things don't work.
What I want to know is how in the world are we going to spread our democracy around the world with attitudes like that, guys?
But as long as right, well, what you're saying is, hey, you cleaned up the gang violence in El Salvador, but you did it in an oppressive way that was oppressive to the gangs, and you didn't status, and it wasn't a woke way. You did that. And he's like, who cares? We're safe. We're safer now. So I'm not going to listen to what you have to say. We're going to see a lot more of this guy if he stays healthy, if you know what I mean. Here he is Bitcoin bit because not only does he say these things about cleaning up crime, but he says these things about U.S. financial systems, and watch him drop these truths. And then let's connect it to whether or not this means that the U.S. may be buying Bitcoin on the slide.
When I talk to my conservative friends right here, they're wrong. Of course, high taxes are extremely high here in the United States. I give you that. You're right in that. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is not the high taxes themselves, but the fact that they are not even really funding the government. Not even those high taxes, higher than a lot of places in the world, not even those taxes are really funding the government. So who's financing the government? Government is financed by treasury bonds. And who buys the treasury bonds? Mostly the Fed. And how does the Fed buy them? By printing money. But what backing does the Fed have for that money being printed?
Have fun.
The treasury bonds themselves.
Thanks.
So basically, you finance the government by printing money out of thin air.
Let's go.